Mr. Mayor. Looks like we're all ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I will call this City Council workshop meeting to order. Deputy Recorder Patton, please call roll.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Youth Councilor Calderon.
Here.
Council President Goodhouse.
Here.
Councilor Newton.
Here.
Councilor Lube.
Here.
And Councilor Anderson.
Here.
All right. Will you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Mute yourselves, and Mike, please display the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under justice.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Nolip. Staff or council, any non-agenda items tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. We do not have any non-agenda items this evening.
I think one member of the council may. Council President Goodhouse.
I do. I was expecting it at the end, but then that's right. We do them now.
Well, I'm just asking for topics. We'll discuss it near the end of the meeting, but do you want to explain the topic that you'd like?
Yes, the topic I'd like to discuss would be due to the governor's freeze announcement on Friday last week. I'd like to take a look and discuss a little more as a council any other further aid we may offer to businesses or programs or what we may want to do to help out those Tiger businesses that may be affected by the freeze and how long it might last. So that's the topic I'd like to discuss at the non-agenda item period.
Okay, we'll put that on for discussion as a non-agenda item, and I would ask that staff that are on the line that would be appropriate for that discussion, including Mr. Purdy, please stay through that time if possible. And anyone else, I'm not singling him out, but he was the one that came immediately to mind that we might want to have stay on the line. And anyone else, Interim City Manager Nyland, if you want to direct others to stay for that, I just don't want people to drop off the meeting before we have that discussion who you think should be here for that.
I will do. Thank you, sir.
All right. First item on the agenda is to receive a briefing on Tigard Maintain, Advance, and Diversify Employment Made Program. Associate Planner Pollard.
Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is Hope Pollard. I'm the new Associate Planner. I'm really looking forward to working with you all, and I'm really excited to talk about this new project Tigard made with you all this evening. Mike's going to help me out with the slides tonight. Please note, we're not asking for the council to make a decision this evening. We're just asking for your input, your ideas, and your feedback as we get started on this project. Next slide, please. To provide some background on why Tigard made, why we're doing this project, Tigard is seeing a number of changes in development patterns and business operations, locally, regionally, and even nationally. We're seeing an influx of remote working situations, of course, but we're also seeing a number of other changes, including a transition away from previously clear-cut definitions of industrial and commercial uses. Alongside these evolving trends, the city is experiencing a constraint of available vacant employment land supply. And we're also being reminded of the massive importance we need to be placing on social equity and environmental sustainability in all of our decision making, as reflected in our new strategic plan. So the Tigard Made project represents our effort to address these changing situations and use them as an opportunity to innovate and make our development code better than ever. So with this project, we're going to be looking at ways that we can modernize our development code to maintain our existing employment, advance into the future, and diversify the types of development and opportunities provided here. So Tigard Made covers all the city's employment lands as indicated in red on this map. So that's all the industrial, commercial, and mixed use zones not already included in existing plan districts like Washington Square or downtown Tigard, although we will be working closely with the project managers of these areas as well. Please note that the project also does not contain, is also not going to be looking at updates to residential zones, although we will be looking at the impact and needs of home occupation permits and how these vital businesses fit into our employment landscape and how we might consider future code updates. Next slide, please. So to give you an example of where we've come from and where we're headed, traditional zoning was really well suited to keep really heavy industrial uses away from residential uses. And it looks something like this, with residential, industrial, and commercial uses very separately defined and very separately contained. So the images we have here are from all around Tigard and show some of these uses. So at top right, we have some auto and self-storage uses. At the bottom right, we have fought steel, a very heavy industrial use. And at the bottom left, we have a general commercial with some box grocery store, restaurant, UPS, these kinds of uses. So today, a lot of uses are blurring traditional definitions of what's industrial and what's commercial. Of course, really heavy industrial uses like fought steel will continue to stay separate, but there are a lot of opportunities to encourage more mixing with other uses. Next slide, please. For example, today we're seeing uses like, in the top right, this eat, drink, adopt. We're seeing uses like breweries, which are considered industrial uses, mixing with tasting rooms and dog adoption centers, considered commercial uses, all within the same business and the same location. At the bottom right, we have a maker space. So this is something like a boutique manufacturer, often making goods on site and sometimes selling within the same location, with impacts primarily contained inside and with fewer deliveries than traditional heavy manufacturing uses. And at the bottom left, we have a Tigard Triangle project, the 72nd mixed use project. So we have residential on top and retail on bottom. And then finally, at the top left, we have an image from our strategic plan showing the value of connectivity. So as we start to mix more uses, we'll be bringing these uses into closer proximity to each other, which will encourage the connectivity that we so value. So Tigard Made, the project aims to understand all of these shifting trends and modernize our code to meet them, while also maintaining existing businesses and community character. So the project is still in its early stages. We don't totally know the final answer on how to approach these things, like what degree of flexibility is best, what kinds of mixes, land uses mix best together. But these are the questions that will be the central focus of this project. The main idea for us is to refine some of these older use categories, figure out what mixes well, and focus more on the actual impacts of uses. So all of these changes also provide us with another opportunity though, and this is what I'm really excited about with this project. We're in a moment where it is time to modernize our code, but today we recognize that that means something more than just addressing land supply challenges. Today we recognize that that also means focusing on social equity and environmental sustainability. So as we look at opportunities for innovation, we'll also be placing a heavy focus on these items. We'll be working to identify city policies and regulations that act as barriers to economic prosperity for historically marginalized communities, including looking at obstacles for new business owners seeking to open up here and obstacles to career advancement for employees who work here. And finally, we'll also be looking at opportunities to incentivize sustainable development, such as building with eco-friendly building materials and reducing construction-related emissions. So we have a lot of important goals here, but we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we still have a development code that is clear and as simple as possible. So that's where our community engagement strategy is going to be so important. Next slide, please. A big part of our outreach is going to be talking to individual business owners, developers, and city staff to ensure that we're truly understanding the needs and experiences of all these groups with city regulations. So what land use regulations have caused problems for people, what have been helpful, and so on. So we're still defining our community engagement strategy. So far, it's focused on 3 primary tools, which consist of a website, group meetings, and one-on-one interviews. And then we have 4 participant groups, which should actually, has actually over even the past few days grown to 5 participant groups. We're also considering city staff as part of our outreach as well now. So we have residents, employees, developers, business owners, and city staff that we'll be talking to through this process. So for residents and employees, we'll be focusing our outreach primarily through the website, as the questions we have for them are more direct and focused on what uses they would or would not like closer to home or closer to work. We will be continuing to conduct these surveys throughout the entire process, coming back again and again to make sure that we're on the right track to protecting and creating the kind of community that these groups value. Outreach to developers and business owners will utilize all 3 tools. So this will allow us to learn some more of the nuances regarding businesses and development trends, and will also allow us to have some of those deeper, harder to have conversations about what equitable economic development looks like. And then for city staff, we'll also be conducting some interviews to understand some areas where we want some more clarity in our code and some obstacles we might want to be aware of and avoid as we move forward. So we've actually already started to have conversations with developers and city staff just this week. We've already learned some really valuable information regarding what's important to them and where they have some major concerns. And we've also reached out to the Chamber of Commerce and are getting ready to set up a time to have a presentation and a Q&A session with the Chamber. And we're also starting to identify some community-based organizations that we can partner with to ensure that we're having the conversations that we need to have with the historically marginalized groups and those who have been underrepresented in outreach efforts in the past. This will allow us to have, we think that partnering with these community-based organizations will allow us to have more meaningful outreach and make sure that we're using our outreach with these groups not just to move forward the goals of this project, but to really include it as part of an important step in our overall goals for building stronger, more enduring bonds with our community. Next slide, please. So how are we going to achieve all these lofty goals? The project will be broken up into 3 main parts. So the first part will be research, second will be updates, and the third will be implementation. So the state actually requires all cities to conduct an economic opportunities analysis through which we assess employment land needs and project what employment lands in the city will look like over the next 20 years. But we're actually going to take this analysis a step further with this project and use it to ask how different land use regulations and mixes will influence these employment projections. So this is where we will be really defining some of our best practices and then analyzing how these practices would actually play out in Tigard. At the same time, we'll be conducting an audit of our development code and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And that'll take us to about March 2021. From there, we'll be working on the actual policy and code updates. And then around January 2022, we'll be implementing, training staff, and marketing these updates to the community. Please note that community outreach will be ongoing throughout. So we'll be continuing to reach out to all the participant groups, and we'll be coming back to Planning Commission and the City Council multiple times throughout to check in and make sure we're on the right track as we progress. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation for this evening. I'm available, as is Lloyd Purdy, who's working on this project with me, and Tom is also here to answer any questions you might have. Just a reminder, we're not asking for a decision tonight, just looking for some feedback and your input as we get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, let's start with Councilor Newton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that presentation, Ms. Pollard. I was glad to see that home occupations are being looked at. I know business is changing as we're moving forward out of COVID. I have a neighbor who has been told she's never going back to her office. She's going to continue to work from home. So I think we've got some changes coming there. And I was also glad to hear you're going to try to make the process as simple as possible. it's great to have flexibility, and I think that's really important. But I think it's important to balance the flexibility with some simplicity too, as you actually write the new code language. And then keying in on potential impacts of changes in the code on the surrounding uses and the neighborhood. I think it's going to be important too as we look at the flexibility. You may not be able to answer this, but the only question I had was, you said that you talked to some developers and staff and had learned some things. And I was wondering if you would mind sharing one or two of those things with us. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So regarding what we've learned from some of the developer conversations, we're kind of learning, I'm trying to trying to boil down what we've learned so far, but one thing that we learned from the developers, we talked to so far someone who's involved in industrial development and someone who's more on the architecture side. So we're kind of learning kind of what is possible in terms of mixing uses, and kind of seeing some options in terms of what's available. So I think we're usually more familiar with mixtures of like retail with residential, and we're trying to start to explore what are some of the other mixes that are possible. So in talking to these developers, we are seeing that there are other mixes that are possible, whether within the same building or just in the same area, with the demand for things like maker spaces. And we also, I was encouraged to see that from one of the developers we spoke to, that there is a desire for redevelopment of existing buildings, which of course is going to be really important for us as we're running low on our vacant employment land supply. So to hear that there was an interest in looking at redevelopment, which in my mind was maybe a little bit more difficult for developers to approach, was encouraging. And then, yeah, city stuff, it's a little bit more nuanced. There's a lot of little details of maybe certain like uses that we've struggled to figure out where to define them in our code. And they're just good to highlight for now as we move forward to see how we could better define them in our code.
Thanks, that's helpful. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lube?
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Hope, for the presentation, and welcome to Tigard.
Thanks.
Councillor Anderson?
Just a few things. On your participant groups, are you considering the commercial real estate brokers in the area?
Yes. They're kind of lumped in with our developer group and that participant group, although we know there's some nuances there, but we definitely have them on our list and have some meetings set up with some, yes.
Good, yeah. I've heard from a few that have frustrations. They'll have a building, for example, that will have 10 or 20 people coming in for light industrial, but the city says it's retail only. And it's like, really? So that would be a good perspective. Also, you know, the hottest thing in commercial right now is flex space, for warehouse space. And we do have some buildings that could be redeveloped for that. So Tigard has really few compared to, you know, out by the airports and even Tualatin. So it'd be interesting to see what comes up out of that. But otherwise, I like the program, and good job on the presentation.
Thank you.
Youth Councillor Calderon?
No comments or questions. That was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council President Goodhouse?
Yes, agreed. A great presentation. I do have a question, but this may not be for you or may not be quite on the topic, but I have heard from some recent regional meetings that having to do with River Terrace West, there's been talk about turning that completely into employment land, something similar to Nimbus. I know council before we've talked about that and talked about mixed use in the area, or haven't really discussed that, but I don't know if that falls into this conversation or it might be another conversation. But since we're talking about employment lands and so forth, I don't know if you have any or maybe I saw Tom pop in there. So I heard some people talked about that recently, and so it kind of surprised me. I know we, as a council, we talked about mixed use in the area, but not turning that completely into a employment land area.
I can answer that question for you. Tom McGuire, Assistant Community Development Director. We are definitely not looking at having River Terrace West be exclusively employment land. We're talking about some mixed uses out there, but there will be a very strong residential component with some commercial and hopefully employment mixed in. But we are very, very far from anything being decided, and it's definitely not going to be exclusively employment.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because especially with COVID and a lot of, as was already mentioned, a lot of businesses switching to going home or working from home only and things like that. That was kind of interesting, but you know, this is great as Tigard needs more of this for our, as stated, we've looked at when our levy went through and so forth. Commercial use is a lot better use for the city. It takes a lot less resources, helps the city out. So this is a great step forward to that. Looking forward of how we can really diversify Tigard and hopefully make it a community where people can also work and live in the same area.
All right, thank you. Ms. Pollard, I have a couple questions, and then you're new to Tigard, and it might be great for our community to just get a quick 30-second to 60-second introduction of you just to the community. But let me ask a couple questions first, and really, actually, it's probably just one general question about, you know, the presentation was excellent and has me thinking, and I guess I just want to verify and maybe help clarify and also simplify at the same time for our community what all this means. And Mr. McGuire, maybe you want to comment on this too, but I get the sense from this presentation that will the results of this work look something kind of like the lean code in the triangle that we implemented a few years ago? Like, is it going to likely, you know, take more of a form-based code approach to things? And Hope, I realize you may not be able to answer that precisely because you weren't around for that whole thing. I'm sure you know about our lean code, but I guess I want to just get the big picture here. Is that what we might expect, or something like that throughout the city?
I would imagine that there will definitely be elements of that we'll find will work for this. Yes.
It may not be the same content, but the approach would be similar.
Correct.
Okay.
We'll probably see a fairly large reduction in the number of zones as well. So fewer zones, more flexible regulations. And again, yes, similar to the Tigard Triangle, form-based, but there could also be some. We're trying to get a little bit away from use categorizations and really concentrating on offsite impacts. So things that take place inside buildings and don't have any outside offsite impacts, or don't generate lots and lots of traffic, or, you know, we'll be seeing things that are similar in those characteristics grouping together most likely.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Pollard, do you want to introduce yourself briefly to the community?
Sure. Yes, my name is Hope Pollard. I just moved up here from Irvine, California. Been looking for a place like Tigard for quite some time. Always scouring the job boards for a place kind of just like this, and then Tigard came up. Kind of famous city in the planning world too. So, so all my fellow, my old classmates were envious. But no, I'm just really happy to be here. Been looking to move up to the Pacific Northwest for some time. Have a background in some code updates for like small cell wireless and stuff, and a lot of development review. And now I'm just really looking forward to working on this long range project with you all.
Well, fabulous. We're lucky to have you, and thank you for picking Tigard, despite our Supreme Court case that everybody knows about. All right. Is there anything else that you were briefing us, and we've given you kind of our feedback and thoughts? Does that conclude this item on the agenda?
I believe so.
Okay. I just want to, I mean, if Tom, if you guys are looking for more direct, I mean, did you get what you were wanting out of the discussion? Do you feel like you have any other questions?
No, I think we got what we were.
Okay.
I think, yeah, we were just mainly. You've heard me refer to this from time to time when I give you my periodic updates on legislative projects, and we just really wanted to give you this update because it's actually happening now, and we have a lot more details, and wanted to get your feedback and let you know what was going on. So yeah, I think we have what we want.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Hope. Really appreciate it, and welcome to Tigard.
Thank you.
Can I ask one other question?
Sure, Council President Goodhouse, go for it.
Since when we're mapping this out in the projected areas, are we going to try to also tie those into some kind of either bike paths or something that can be something more of a walkable community where not only would it be near a bus line, but maybe also paths where people can go from transit and use paths to get there?
Yes, active transportation and connectivity is definitely a big element of what we're looking at, and one of the things we're considering for how to incentivize certain things and public improvements. And we're also looking, I'm also going to be working with Dave Roth and his transportation system plan update as we move forward with the project, and how the uses that we're looking at and the transportation system plan could work together. Perfect.
Great. Yeah, I've been hearing a lot more lately at the conferences where a lot more people, they can get to areas through bikes and so forth. So the people that might be, when we're looking at things with the equity lens, or people that may not have lower income, it was a lot more accessible by bike lanes or traffic or things like that for people to get to those. They've done a lot of maps. They've shown where people with the lower income areas or that so forth. So that would be great where people could easily get through that. And it would help with our congestion and everything else as well.
Yes, it's. I'll just say it's a pretty exciting time in community development. We have a lot of projects, and they're all very closely related, and they're all working together. You've got the River Terrace expansion concept planning. You've got this project. You've got the transportation system plan, the TSP update that affects transportation throughout the city, Washington Square update. So, yeah, coordinating on all of these things and hoping for some really good projects to come out in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which is to consider approval of Tigard's state and federal advocacy agenda. Senior Management Analyst Hendricks.
Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. It's good to see you. I'm gonna pop up my presentation. Tonight, I'm here to present the list of potential priorities for inclusion in Tigard's 2021 state and federal legislative agendas. Each year, Council considers our citywide priorities, community and partner initiatives, and our local issues and opportunities to represent our interests at the state and federal level for the upcoming year. And so tonight, our ask is that you have reviewed the attached priority list in your council packet, which I'll also highlight in my presentation. Select 4 to 6 priorities for Tigard's state and federal agenda each, and approve that agenda. So once we get that approved, the final topic areas will be formatted into a final agenda that we can distribute. So I'll start with the state priority list. So this is a list of 11 potential priority areas developed by our city leadership team, and the description of each of these are in your council packet. And you may notice a lot of similarities between last year's state agenda and this year's, the priority list. And in the 2020 state legislative session, the state only had 3 bills that passed due to the cap and trade bill disagreements. So many of the bills that kind of were in progress did not pass this past year. So for sake of time and to allow for discussion of these items, I won't read through all of them, but I did want to point out 2 things. One, because of the transportation 2020 measure that didn't pass, we included the 99W corridor study as a potential legislative item because that was going to be part of that measure. And then this year, again, we also have a lot of these priorities that align with the league's priorities. And so I just marked what priorities have some overlap between the two, and I will say too that some of these, like the marijuana tax, a local cap increase, is something that the league is working on this session, but it just wasn't a priority. So we will work with them on whatever we end up selecting for the state list. But these are a handful that overlap with the leagues. And also, before I forget, we have a new incoming District 35 representative-elect, Dacia Graber, and we reached out to her to congratulate her, and she responded that she's really excited to work with us. So we'll keep her informed of all our updates, and yeah, we're really excited about that. So I just want to pause here and ask if you'd like to discuss the state priority list and then have me move to the federal list, or?
I would suggest that.
Okay. And so last time the previous times we've done this, council has kind of gone through, each council member has gone through and kind of shared their preferred list, and that we can take notes and then discuss and come to agreed upon list, if that's how you would like to approach this discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, and we'll continue to try to move forward. Are you hoping that we get to is there a magic number you're hoping we get to?
Anywhere between 4 and 6, but I know it's always difficult to select, but you know, we only have so much real estate. So I would say 6 top.
Okay. So council, that means 4 to 6, not 6 to 8. And just so you're thinking. And then I will also share that Representative-elect Graber, and I think we've already been able to get at least 1 or 2 of these into legislative concepts based on working pretty early with her on some of this and the upcoming session. So our state legislative agenda in the real world, this is all very formal, but in the real world, some of it's already moving forward, like some work on the jurisdictional transfer of Hall Boulevard. So that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be on the list, but I just want to point that out to people as something that's already starting to move in a variety of ways. Do council want a few moments to reflect, or is there a member of council who's prepared to speak now?
Mayor, can I ask one question real quick?
Sure.
On a clarification on the marijuana tax cap increase, is that the discussion that was going on before or after the state measure passed? And how does that play into with the recent measure that's taken everything above 11.25 million and putting it to the new program?
Yeah, so when we were developing this list a few weeks ago, our finance director, LaFrance, mentioned that this is something that we could pursue. So I'm not sure how the timeline works, but this is something that the league, we touched base with the league, and they said that this is something that's kind of already in progress because there are some bipartisan support for increasing this cap. So I know that doesn't really answer your question, but in terms of timeline, we talked about this a few weeks ago.
Okay, I didn't know if this was before that and was kind of an increase, or this was due to the ballot measure passing. And because I've known that listening to the league calls, a lot of the cities are really up in arms about that. So I know there's been a lot of uproar on that part. So I just was curious if this was something that we were considering before or after.
I will just state, Council President Goodhouse, to that point, because I think it may play in a little bit, is that the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium is really pushing one agenda around just local control and our ability to make our own decisions, and for some reason the concept is escaping my mind now. The way we approach what someone help me here. The word, what was that?
Home rule?
Home rule. Yeah, home rule. Sorry, I don't know why I was having a mind trouble coming up with those words, but really protecting home rule, and so that just those kinds of things around having local control is something that I think we, at least the mayors, feel like is at risk in being eroded in 5G and lots of other ways. So, and the kinds of, having limits on what we can and can't do kind of plays into that theme. But anyway, that's a little bit of an aside, but I think an important thing to be thinking about as we consider the whole legislative agenda. So which counselor would like to go first with what they're proposing as the maximum of 6? Counselor Lube.
Happy to do it. I have 4 that I would consider kind of bigger priorities for me, and then other ones, I could support. For the 4 that would be my higher priorities would be property tax reform, preserve local decision-making authority, affordable housing, and broadband and digital access. I also think the mental health services and the transfer of Hall would go on that list for me as well.
Okay, so that sounds like a pretty robust proposal. Let's take that proposal and go. Did everybody get that list?
I got it.
Could you say it one more time?
What I'd like to do is take maybe have our discussions starting with Councillor Lube's proposal there and see what changes we may need to make.
Councillor Lube, could you?
Sure. So property tax reform, preserve local decision making, affordable housing, and then broadband and digital access. And then to add on would also be mental health services and transfer of Hall.
All right, so if we want to go off, if you're doing a little check sheet, Mayor, of what Councilor Lube said, I have mental health, jurisdiction transfer, property tax, and preserve local decision. The only one she didn't mention was the 99 corridor, which I have in mind.
Councillor Lube, how do you feel about the 99W corridor?
I mean, I'm supportive of it, but I think broadband and digital access is significantly more important, especially considering we know that there's a significant amount of homes in Tigard that don't have access. And we're at a point in time in which if you don't have that, you're crippled right now, basically. And so it just shows that I think broadband and digital access needs to be considered just one of those basic utilities that everyone should have access to. And it's time to make it a priority.
Okay, Youth Councillor Calderon.
I also have broadband and digital mental health, the Hall transfer and affordable housing on mine. Property taxes is something to support, but I just don't know as much about that. But if you guys support it, I'm down to support it too.
It's kind of the root of a lot of our challenges just in general. So that's why it's been intractable and unchanged for 24 years or 25 years. So it's kind of a thorn in our side.
Can I also add that I believe Senator Burdick has really decided to take this on and champion it during her last legislative session. So it sort of feels like this is an opportunity to really jump onto it and have a real shot at making change.
Well, that sounds like something we should be pushing for.
Youth Councillor Calderon, anything else you want to add?
No, I had a very similar list to Councillor Lube.
Okay, Council President Goodhouse.
I wanted to just ask a clarifying question on the broadband. Is that because usually when the conversation comes up statewide, it's for usually communities that don't have the infrastructure. But would this be pushing for infrastructure, or would it be pushing for access to more people? Because as it's written, it's saying support funding for increased broadband infrastructure and technical assistance, where we have a lot of that infrastructure here. But would it also include providing to those who wouldn't be able to get it and assistance? Or do we want to change some of that verbiage?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely change that language to add in if people to indicate that people need more access. And then I would also want to look at like the league's language too, to see what they're pursuing and just make sure that we're coordinated on that front.
Okay, because I agree with Councilor Lube that with more people working from home and kids, that we need more bandwidth. But I hate for the argument to come back that Tiger's got enough of the infrastructure in place, but we do have the need for assistance if people get there. So I'd like to change the language, because I know back in DC, when we push the league part on the state level, it's usually for those areas that don't have the higher bandwidth or the infrastructure. So I'd hate to get that mixed up in there, where we push for infrastructure, but then we already have the infrastructure in place and we need more assistance and availability.
Yeah, we will include that language. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson?
I'm okay with Councilor Lube's list. The homelessness issue is interesting because Metro's supportive housing services bond will start hitting probably in April or May of this year. So we're going to have a lot of influx of revenue that a lot of the state won't have. So I would kind of see how that goes first, how that spending is allocated. But certainly the property tax reform, probably number one on everybody's list.
All right, thank you. Councilor Newton. Do we have, I don't see Councilor Newton's picture now. I don't know if others do.
She's on mute.
Oh, and speaking?
Yeah.
You're
Am I
still
on now?
muted, Council.
Got it. Okay. I had property tax reform. I also had affordable housing and mental health services, because I think those priorities both can help address homelessness to a degree. So I had those on the top. And then I had 99W corridor, and I took a little bit of a different approach on the broadband, and I said infrastructure, because I thought, there's a lot more to it than just the broadband, but I could go with the broadband because I think that's really important as well. So the jurisdictional transfer of Hall Boulevard, I think that's important, but I feel like that's kind of already underway. And so I don't know, maybe I'm wrong there, but that would be my comment on that one. I don't think it's unimportant, but I feel like we're already underway on that. And obviously, if we can't get the funding we need, we're going to have an issue there. So I agree that home rule is important too. So those are just my thoughts. There's most of the ones that have already been named I could support.
I would actually like the preserve local decision-making authority to be expanded to say, and protect home rule. Unless, are we really meaning, well, did we leave home rule out of that specifically, like the actual language, Nicole?
Not on purpose, but this was something that our community development director, Kenny Asher, provided. So he could probably speak more to that than I could.
Is Mr. Asher on the line? Perhaps not. Okay.
I agree with you, Mayor, though. I think the word home rule should be in there.
I'm so sorry. I am here.
So, Kenny, the question was about, you provided preserve local decision-making authority as a suggestion to the state legislative agenda, and we're wondering if the use of the term home rule authority is like including that, was home rule authority left out on purpose?
I'm actually probably not the person. I'm probably not the source of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest that we adjust it to include home rule in addition to the way it's written now. It doesn't need to be replaced, but I would propose that we include that one, and that we include home rule in part of the language to make that connection. Can everybody live with that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So let's talk about the merits of some of the others. It seems like property tax reform stays for sure, right? So that's number 2. I didn't hear anyone say no to that one. That means we have 2 to 4 more. I did not hear anyone talking about including police transparency, and I'm okay with that. I might have even called this more like police reform or police, and not because we're talking about it from our own perspective, but more because that's what the state is calling it, and the state legislative concepts are around what they call police reform. What I will say about that is that I think for this year, I think we're going to need to monitor it. But if we're going to be actively advocating for certain things in that space, I think that would come after the work of our Public Safety Advisory Board and them coming back to us and saying, this is what we think needs to change. So I just think that one is too early in the timing of that work for us, because I mean, there's some specific things that I've been kind of talking with Representative-elect Graber, but they're more very specific things that don't belong on this legislative agenda. So I just wanted to make a comment about that because we've spent a lot of time working in that space, but I'm not going to propose that be on our legislative agenda this year for those reasons.
Mr. Mayor, I had the same thought on that.
Okay.
I thought it was a little premature. I should have said something, but I had the same thought.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Newton. Let's talk about broadband and digital access. I heard some people pushing that. There was a little bit of a suggested maybe modification of concept by Councilor Newton and support, I think, from multiple other members of the council. Is that one that we feel should be in? I mean, can people support including that? And what do people think about Councilor Newton's sort of reframing of that a little bit around infrastructure?
You mean hers or mine? I missed maybe Councilor Newton's comment. Were you talking about the making it more so access for people rather than infrastructure?
Councilor Newton, I don't want to misspeak, so why don't you state your point about that again?
Yeah, when I was looking at broadband, I'm the council's representative on the Cable Commission, and I concur that we've got a real issue there with access. I think it's really important, but I think we have other infrastructure needs as well. So I thought about maybe having an infrastructure priority in which we could name some other things besides this, but I'm also fine with focusing on digital access if that's important to the rest of the council.
Okay, how many people are supportive of that of including broadband? Maybe it could be broadband, digital access, and infrastructure, or broadband infrastructure and digital access. How do you want it phrased? Councilor Newton, do you have a?
No, I mean, I'm fine. I think the rest of the council seems to be more comfortable with focusing on broadband and digital access. So okay. I'm fine with that. I just wanted to, put forth what I was thinking about it what I was looking at the list. So I'm fine with that.
I would say that I would be fine with adding the infrastructure piece. I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think, Tigard may not have necessarily as many issues with that specific infrastructure, but I think that still statewide it's important, but I know we're talking about Tigard specifically legislatively.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, if we don't feel like it's a real issue for us, we shouldn't be wasting our few words on that, I guess. you know, from a prioritization standpoint. I agree with that comment statewide, but you know, we're trying to get our few and focused comments here. So, okay, I think let's check for agreement. Can the rest of the council or the entire council support broadband and digital access? Can I get thumbs ups or?
Yes.
Yeah, quick question, Mayor.
Yep.
Does this include the negotiation for the franchise fees statewide?
I don't know if that's what's intended with this.
No.
You mean as far as us being able to raise them, or what part of that exactly?
Well, obviously everybody's negotiating their franchise fees separately, and I thought that the state was trying to kind of do it as a regional level.
Nicole, do
I
you
think
have?
this just has to do with access, doesn't it?
Yes, that was the original intent, but we can change that.
I'm fine with Councilor Newton's proposal.
Mayor,
Council President Goodhouse?
I would still like to maybe see some part that, I mean, maybe it falls into the access, but some kind of a affordability portion or some kind of an access to those that can't normally access it. I don't know if that falls into this area or not.
Well, I think you mean if financial is the reason someone has a barrier, then yes, it would be included, at least in my mind. I think that's how we have it envisioned. Councillor Lube, do you agree with that as your understanding of what you're thinking there? I mean, it's not the only part of it, but it's part of it.
Yes.
Okay. So we are up. Nicole, I hope you're tracking this. Are we up to 3 or 4?
I have 3. I have local decision making, property tax reform, and then the broadband and digital access.
All right. So I'm going to make a comment about the jurisdictional transfer of Hall Boulevard. I know someone made a comment about this being sort of something that's already underway. And what I will tell you is that in Salem, to make stuff happen, you kind of have to just beat it and hit it and beat it again. And I don't think that's necessarily a good reason to not have it on our legislative priorities, because when we're down there speaking and we want to hand this out, this is definitely a talking point, and it's going to be awkward to be there and be talking about it and be handing this literature out and not have it on there. So I think jurisdictional transfer of Hall should be included, but I could certainly be convinced otherwise. Council President Goodhouse?
I agree on that note as well, and I know I think we've in the past listed the Orphan Highway Fund, but that's been tossed around for a while, and that's where I think this was what would be good on there, is that for a long time it keeps getting mentioned down in Salem, but nothing ever really traction and moving forward. But to fund the orphan highways and do a one and done and get them transferred over to jurisdictions. So I think it's definitely, even though we're working on it and the staff's working on it, the biggest hurdle, and the mayor and I have been on a committee where we're talking about it, that the biggest hurdle, if we're having to fund most of it, it probably can't be done. So if we can get the state to do an orphan highway fund and just take care of it, would be really important. So I don't know if we even want to mention orphan highway fund in the language or leave it alone.
Mr. Mayor, I was the one who made the comment about it underway, and I'm kind of smiling because when we were trying to get the funding for the Wall Street Hunziker improvement, I think the reason we were successful is because of exactly what you said. And I have a really short memory because I was the one that went down there with Mayor Cook to harass everybody in Salem to get that funding. So I think you're right. I think it just would reinforce the fact that we want to keep this going. So I'm sort of amusing myself here. But the other thing is, I think if we're going to do that, I think we should leave it focused on jurisdictional transfer of Hall Boulevard and the funding needed from the state for that. And although I think the Orphan Highway Fund is a good idea, I'm not sure we want to take away focus from what it is we really wanted to achieve here. So
I would agree, because we want it to be Tigard focused, and this is what this issue looks like in Tigard, and so we should keep that focus that way, in my opinion. Can people live with that and include jurisdictional transfer of hall? Do I have?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're up to 4, Nicole. I know you want to cut us off.
You're fine.
And we're not even, we do need to do a little time check. We're already, I just want to warn everybody, we're already 10 minutes over. We haven't gotten to the federal agenda. I intend, because these are next year's legislative priorities, I also intend to let Councillor-elect Shaw briefly comment on whatever we decide on. And so we are headed for a meeting that's going to be over time. So I'll just warn everybody about that now, because I think this is important. So the other, I think mental health, let's talk about mental health for a minute. I agree with what Councillor Anderson had said about sort of the wraparound services rolling in, at least in the Portland metro area, the Tri-County area. I think, you know, affordable housing too, that's an area that there's a fair bit of regional work and progress happening. I still think the state, if I have to look at mental health and say, is the state doing its job around mental health provision of services? The answer is no, and I feel like that should probably be included. Does anyone want to take me on and suggest differently? And Councillor Lou, that was on your list, right?
Yes, the mental health services was on my list.
Councillor Newton, were you, sorry, did I cut you off?
no, that's fine. I agree with you. I think it should be on the list.
Okay, that makes 5.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, as well. I think that's one of the most important things, is getting worse and worse.
Do we want to be rare Tigard Council and only provide 5 when we could have had 6? I think we may want to be focused here. I'm not sure I feel the same way or as strongly about or I don't know, homelessness as well. We've got a lot underway. I'm hesitant to push that state-wise, just for the reasons we talked about, differently than what's already happening. What do you think about the 5 we've got? I see a lot of thumbs. Okay, Councillor Newton, you can live with that?
Keep it simple.
No, yeah, I was just looking,
Okay.
and I agree on homelessness. It's important, but I'm thinking about what we've been talking about in terms of being Tigard specific. And I'm not sensing something that for the next year, let's say, we have something specific to push there for Tigard. If we did a program, or, you know, then I would think that would be important. But and obviously we want to help in any way we can, but we don't have anything real specific there to ask for.
All right, Councillor-elect Shaw, I know this is, you know, we've only got maybe a minute, but do you have any on this for the state legislative agenda? Do you have anything that you would like to say about what we've done, or make any suggestions that we change anything state-wise? And I'll give you an opportunity after the federal one as well.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Snyder. I very much appreciate that. No, I think you've all made a very good decision. One additional factor you may want to consider is with the state infrastructure and with Governor Brown, transportation and infrastructure related corridors are going to be key in some of the negotiations for 2021. So when you may consider, though, I know you want to stop at 5, is the 99W corridor, because they are looking for collaborative projects. But besides
So
that,
you think that's an opportunity that maybe because of the timing we might want to include?
correct.
Council, what do you think?
I go with that. That
Okay.
was my 6th one.
All right,
I had the corridor on mine as well.
I see enough thumbs. Okay. Councillor-elect Shaw, you've got your first thing done as a Tigard City Councilor-elect.
Well, thank you all to providing that success. I appreciate it.
All right, and we'll come back to you at the end of our discussion on the federal agenda. And
Terrific.
let's transition to that. Nicole, do you have what you need on the state?
Yes, I do, and I'll include the language that you suggested for local decision making and the broadband digital access. Oops. So moving on to the federal priority list, since we're running behind, I'll just mention one thing. Because of the Transportation 2020 measure, we were hoping that match funding would be available for the Build 2021 program, but since that measure did not pass, staff is suggesting to remove the Build 2021 priority list item off this list. So.
Oh, I love technology.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
I can now. Did you guys, yeah, I got kicked out of the meeting, so did you guys continue or?
Sorry, yeah, I just said staff is recommending to remove the Build 2021 from the federal priority list because of the T2020 measure funding didn't pass, and that's where we were hoping to get some match funding for that program. So we're just recommending that we remove that from the list of options.
Okay. And is that all you guys did while I was off the line briefly?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So awkward. Facilitating a meeting and getting kicked out is quite odd. All right. And let's see. Councillor Newton, you want to start with your thoughts on this? And Nicole, how many are you hoping we get to? Just the 4 to 6 again you've got there?
Yep, 4 to 6.
Okay, I had infrastructure investment, COVID-19 funding, assistance to state, local, and tribal governments, telecommunications, fiscal year 2021 program levels for CDBG block grants. Those were 4. And then I also had FAST Act.
All right. Council President Goodhouse.
One I was going to mention, I know that we had the discussion on the prior one, but with the new administration coming in and with at the National League of Cities and talking with the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, I think Southwest Corridor Light Rail might be a good one. There with the new administration, there might be chances of more funding. And it might be a long shot, but there also might be a good shot of getting funding from that angle to get that project done. So I think that leaving that off there, even though our measure didn't go through, there may be a very good chance with the new infrastructure package coming through, especially with DeFazio being the head of that committee and really wanting to see that project happen in the area. We have a really good shot of having that happen.
Nicole, you're not suggesting, or you suggested the Build 2021 be struck, not the Southwest Corridor, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to clarify, Council President Goodhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
And otherwise, I agree with Councilor Newton. I mean, we have basically 7 on here, and we're looking for 4 or 6 after striking one. So I think they're all. I mean, I looked at them, and they're all very important in their own ways. So it's kind of hard to pick which ones not to be on there. But I wanted to emphasize that with the corridor, just from the conversations I've been having this week and in the prior weeks.
Well, I'm going to make a suggestion here because I had noticed that there were only 7 for a list of 6 in also. I'm going to suggest that we actually take the Southwest Corridor Light Rail and infrastructure investment and actually just title it Southwest Corridor Light Rail Infrastructure Investment, because that's our specific example that we'd like to see, and that will make 6. I actually think the restoring the SALT deductions is pretty important for the West Coast, and really a hardship for many members of our community, where property values, property taxes, and very high relative state income taxes are really challenging for people. So unless there's a huge objection, I'm going to make that suggestion, and that gets us to to 6, can people live with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We actually had 7 last year.
Tom, I love it.
Well,
Counselor Lube, I can't see you right now, so are you a yes?
Yes, I am. And the salt deduction was very high on my list. Simply any way we can get, our residents some tax relief would be a huge win for us.
Yep. Okay, so there's nobody that can't live with that. Youth Counselor Calderon, I can't see you either. Do you have anything on this? Okay.
Your idea too is a good idea. I support it.
And Counselor-elect Shaw, what do you think of the work we've done?
Mayor Snyder, I think it's excellent. That was going to be my suggestion as well, was to combine the Southwest Infrastructure quarter, those two into one category. So brilliant. And I think we could possibly get that across the finish line with Congressman DeFazio, re-election, Senator Merkley, as well as, you may know, Nick Blosser, who's the Chief of Staff from Governor Brown's office, has departed and joined the Biden-Harris transition team, and he's going to serve as a state and local liaison. So we also have an opportunity there to make sure this is a priority. So thank you.
All right. Nicole, do you feel like you have what you need on the federal agenda?
Yes.
And does this conclude this agenda item?
I know last time we asked for like a formal motion. I'm not sure if we need that or not, if our city attorney's here, or
We can take a vote. It's unusual that we're voting on something that is not written in any, I don't know. City Attorney Mahal, we need a vote?
No, Council, I'm comfortable with whatever way you decide to do it.
Okay, no vote. We've already taken plenty of time on that, and we're quite behind. So, Nicole, we will, unless you object, we'll move on to item number 4, which is also yours, quarterly update on City Council goals and department work plans.
yes. And I will try to consolidate so that we can make up some time. Okay, why is it taking forever? Okay, sorry. So switching over to our next item, I'm here to provide an update on the progress and alignment of our citywide priorities. And a lot has happened this year. We have a refreshed strategic plan. The city leadership team identified 4 new imperatives that were presented to council in July. And we also have been accomplishing our council goals and created department work plans for the year. So this update is to show you how we are beginning to align these efforts, and then we'll open it up to discuss and offer questions or guidance on these efforts to strategically align the work we do. So the visual on the right shows the cascading strategic alignment, and it starts with our strategic plan as the guiding document. And as you know, this past year, we refreshed our strategic plan, and so now this new vision and values are going to work to inform updating master plans, department level strategic plans, as well as council goal planning and the imperatives over the next 5 years. So these guiding documents kind of help shape and frame the work plans for the year, which also inform division goals and individual goals so that we can ensure that we're achieving our strategic vision and values. And I do want to note too that performance management, like the audit, our budget, community input, and integrated systems like Total Tyler are all key components that kind of help shape and strengthen this alignment. So we are including those as we align with our strategic plan. And before I talk about work plans and council imperatives and how those align, I just want to provide a brief progress report on council goals. City Manager Wine mentioned this back in July. The majority of our council goals have been or are being accomplished. There were 3 items that I want to provide a quick update on. Our citywide communications plan is being worked on and are scheduled to have a final version at the end of December. The Bull Mountain annexation is on pause until the pandemic ends so that it frees up additional support for this project, just in terms of time and capacity. And then the Ash Street crossing, this project had potential to be explored further in the Southwest Corridor, but with T2020 not passing, that has delayed that avenue of support. However, the transportation system plan update will take a high level look at this opportunity along with some recently awarded TGM Downtown Reimagined grant, where we'll see if Ash Street could be part of that conversation.
Nicole, I think it's really important to point out to the broad group of listeners in our community that our plan is not to annex Bull Mountain, and that it's listed that way on this list, but the actual action item is to begin conversations about that long term. So I just want to be clear that that's not that is not what that's indicating.
Thank you for the clarification. And then lastly, council goal planning is on the horizon for 2021. And so that will be an opportunity to align our new strategic plan, vision and values. And then you might recognize this slide. This was presented to you in July, where the city leadership team presented these 4 priority areas, also known as imperatives. And these are efforts that have key intersections that cross departmentally, where we as a city are currently looking to focus our efforts. And so on this next slide, you'll see how our department work plans are starting to shape to hit on some of these priority areas, like constituent management system and COVID response. And then we're also starting to try to align that with our matrix audit measures and recommendations, and again, the strategic plan. When we did work plans at the beginning of the year, we had our old strategic plan. So when we update our work plans in 2021, they'll be aligned with our new strategic plan. So as for department work plans, it's almost been a full year since we created our first work plans, and we wanted to use these documents to ensure that we were being accountable, able to report and manage what actions are being taken to meet these citywide priorities. And like I said before, we'll be incorporating our new strategic plan values, and the 2020 work plans will identify overarching high-level initiatives and efforts that will be pursued in the upcoming year. And that includes things like key actions, expected outcomes, deliverables, and more that you can see on this screen. And then for presenting updates on work plans in the future, we are hoping to align this with the report card, the citywide report card information, so that we can report out in twice a year in July and December and track report card information in those work plans as well. And we want to kind of frame it similar to the capital improvements report that our city engineer Fayette does. And so it'll look like something like you'll see below. And we have a lot of different components moving right now. It's a work in progress with the new plan, the upcoming council goals, work plans, and the priorities. And so this was really just to kind of say that we are working towards this. We're starting to align. And then if you have any discussion or guidance, we would love to hear it. So with that, I will ask for your input. And I flew through that, so if you have questions, feel free to ask. Sorry.
Councillor Newton, questions or comments?
Yeah, Ms. Hendricks, can you go back to the slide that showed the alignment? I was a little confused as to where the performance audit recommendations fit in.
Yeah, so the way
go ahead.
The way I visualize it, and I didn't include the full graphic, but I kind of see the performance audit and community input and the budget as like arrows feeding into the whole picture. So as we work through all of these, every phase, we should be incorporating the audit recommendations and metrics.
So where do those fit in with the department strategic and master plans? I don't
Yeah.
see, I see the strategic plan and council goals, but I don't see the performance audit recommendations. So you're saying they fit in the whole way along? I'm confused. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So for master plans, now that we have our new strategic plan, and some of those metrics in the strategic plan are from our performance audit. And so ideally departments would take a look at our strategic plan, see the metrics that are in there, and then say, hey, like while we update this master plan, these are the things that we are trying to track. And this is what we need to look for moving forward in the next 5-10 years. And then sorry, what was the kind of second?
I just know that I know members in the community that are really hanging on to that performance audit and tracking that. And I just don't want to lose focus. I want people to be able to look at whatever report outs or whatever and be able to find easily how those are woven in, however that is. And so we don't need to take time tonight, but I know a lot of people value that I talk to and are really happy that we did that and think that we're doing a great job, but they're going to continue to look to that for how we're prioritizing things. So I just don't want that to get lost. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay,
yes.
Thanks.
Council President Goodhouse? Nothing? Councilor Loop?
No comments, no.
Councilor Anderson?
I like the quarterly updates. I think that's a great idea. Yep.
Youth Councilor Calderon?
No questions.
All right, Nicole, I do not either. So do you have any other information you need out of this report out?
No, thanks.
Okay. Excellent work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to receiving the capital improvement plan update. City engineer.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yay! Hi, this is Lori Fea. I'm the city engineer. So let me attempt to share my screen. And excellent. So far, so good. Okay. So this is the update on the capital improvement program that I give about quarterly to council. The last time I was before you on this topic was in August when I gave an update on last fiscal year's capital improvement program. So this is kind of first quarter of FY21 update. The capital improvement program is part of the adopted budget. It represents capital design, construction, and some planning projects that have a value of $50,000 or more. I'm hoping that council saw that I put in the packet last Thursday the more detailed project management status reports for each of the projects. And then tonight I'll go through kind of a summary of everything. I did want to note and recognize and appreciate the hard work of staff at the city to implement these projects, particularly in light of COVID. It has added burdens to processes, to meetings, to just being able to review a set of plans. And I'll note that in engineering, half of my staff has young children and they are struggling with childcare and virtual school like so many other people in Tigard, and continuing to deliver on these projects. So I just want to do a shout out to them. Let's see. So I'll try to do this rather quickly. I know we're a little short on time and I have a hard time because there's a lot of cool projects and I want to talk about all of them. But I will talk about them in terms
Lori,
of...
take the time you feel like you need. I don't want to, we need to get the right work done. So take the time you need.
Thank you very much. So I'll note that the projects are divided kind of into our major systems. This is also how they're divided up in the budget book. So parks, streets, water, sewer, storm, and facilities. So I'll go through them that way. So I'll just pick out a few to discuss with you. So on this sheet, I'd like to particularly note the Fano Creek Trail, the RFFA grant project. That's the one where we're designing and we're going to be constructing 3 new segments of Fano Creek Trail and then rehabilitating the section behind City Hall. I wanted to give you a heads up about this one because in the spring, council can expect that we will be coming before you with a land use approval. This is a land use approval that has to go through the planning commission and then come to city council because there are 2 things that need to happen so this project can get underway in terms of construction. There has to be a comprehensive plan amendment because the way our comprehensive plan works to add this trail within significant wetland areas, which because it's following along Fano Creek, it is, requires a comprehensive plan amendment process, and council will need to approve that. In addition to that, some of the segments of trail will require a conditional use approval. So again, those have to go to both planning commission and come to city council. That will likely be in the spring. And then ODOT, who is managing this project because of the federal funds, is currently anticipating putting this out to bid in June. So let's all hope that that remains the case. I'm excited to get this project going. Another thing I'll note is under the parks major maintenance line item, the last item on there says Cook Park ADA dock grant writing. So I just want to note that kind of excited about this. The Oregon Marine Board is very supportive of us putting in a couple of grant applications. One would be for this dock at Cook Park. So the dock now where you can, get into your kayaks or canoes, this is the opportunity to add a structure onto it or a mechanism so that people who are, say, in a wheelchair can get into their canoe, which would be really awesome. And like I said, the Marine Board is very excited about that. They're also excited about funding a potential future river access at the Lasich property site as well. Let's see, I'll just note on the next page that I think you know about the Parks Master Plan being underway. There's some great information that's on the city's Engage website about that, and that we did add scope for a more in-depth review of the recreation program in addition to all the parks themselves and trails. Let's see, the Fano Creek Trail Alignment Study, that's a project to figure out where should the last remaining segment of Fano Creek Trail go, and that's from Bonita to Durham, and it's the last segment of trail for a reason. It is really, really difficult to find an appropriate location for the trail that is just fits into some narrow spaces, is constructible, is permittable. But we've had some really great work going on to look at a whole kind of spaghetti map of options for the trail alignment. And I wanted to note that either this week or next, we're going to be going live on the Engage Tigard website with a public input request on some of the final options for narrowing down the trail location. So I want folks to watch for that. Into streets projects now. I think of particular note in regards to the pavement management program is that a couple of things are going on. One is we've started work on the next 5-year plan. So we kind of do it in cycles of 5 years of which streets come next for overlay, for slurry seal, and for getting to some of the backlog streets. So that work is underway. Concurrent with that, you may recall that council had given direction a number of months ago about updating the street maintenance fee. And that fee is what, of course, pays for the pavement management program. That's the primary thing that money is used for. And that we are to update the street maintenance fee to be more consistent with other jurisdictions, and to more properly apply to all the different types of land uses we have. So to update it to a traffic generation model instead of a model based on parking spaces. Some of the issues with that, where we have some land uses where no parking is required, but people still like drive and park alongside the road, and use the roads to get to those locations. So that work is being started, and we'll be back to council with more information about that as that goes on this winter. I'll note just quickly under the pedestrian and cyclist connections program, you'll notice the last item on there is the 79th Avenue traffic calming. I'm pretty excited about this. We're just starting some work to figure out what are some elements we could put on 79th, some initial elements, and then what can become part of a capital project in the future. That's we already have some money budgeted, like 3 years from now, to start designing some sidewalk to fill in sidewalk gaps along 79th. But the need for this was noted when we were dealing with issues with Ascension Drive, and a lot of discussion about speeding and which are the worst speeding problems in the city. And we started delving in more deeply into analyzing the complaints we would have and comparing them to the speeding, or I guess just the traffic speed information that we have and collect around the city. And what really popped up was 79th is one of the key places in the city where there's a lot of pretty excessive speeding going on. So wanted to note that we're going to be spending some time and dollars on that. North Dakota Bridge and Tigard Street Bridge, I think, both of those are very important to replace. Both of those bridges are in poor condition. We've already spent money on doing temporary repairs the temporary repairs are aging. I want to talk about this in a group also along with the Highway 217 widening project that ODOT is doing, because we have a North Dakota Street Bridge that needs to be replaced. We have a Tigard Street Bridge that needs to be replaced. And as part of the Highway 217 widening by ODOT that's coming up, the Hall Boulevard Bridge that goes over Highway 217 is going to be removed and replaced. Well, anybody who remembers back to 2015, when we had to temporarily close North Dakota Street, when we found out the bridge was in such bad shape and we had to do emergency repairs, just closing that one bridge caused traffic Mageddon in Tigard. We had backups onto Highway 217 from that. So we're working really hard to coordinate these two bridge projects with ODOT's project, which will all be completed in about a 4-year time horizon. So I just wanted to note that the one where we really have control is the Tigard Street Bridge replacement. That's being entirely funded through City of Tigard funds, so we are fully managing it. The North Dakota Street Bridge replacement project, similar to our Fano Creek Trail project, because we have federal funds to help pay for it, ODOT is managing that project. And it has already taken 12 months, and they still haven't signed a contract with the consultant, hopefully soon. But so what we want to do with the Tigard Street Bridge project is get it designed, get it ready to bid. So that is the thing that we can have in play to figure out what works best on the schedule. I will also note, just for folks to keep an eye out, supposedly this week, ODOT is going to go live with a virtual open house about the Highway 217 widening project, and folks can go to www.hwy217, so highway217.org, and you'll be able to find out more information about that project and the schedule. What I've been told recently is that the Hall Boulevard removal and 6-month closure will be in the 2023 to 2024 timeframe. But as they get closer to bidding this project, that could change a bit because the contractor will have some influence on that.
Lori? Council President Goodhouse. I was going to add that comment, but in addition to that, with the 217 project, there is going to be lane closures, and around that same time frame, the 23-24 time frame, there's going to be 217 is going to be shut down for, I think, a weekend or a couple weekends. So when they do some of the final paving, that'll be shut down completely. So I did mention when I was on a call with them that you know, to make sure we coordinate that, because we have some bridges that are going to be done at the same time. So you don't want Hall closed and our bridges being done, and then 217 completely closed.
No, I think everybody's heads will explode. Yes, so we are keeping in close contact with ODOT. In fact, we have a meeting coming up soon where we've requested a meeting that involves the Highway 217 project people and the North Dakota Bridge project people, so we can have closer communication on all of that. So let's see, additional streets projects. Wall Tech Center Drive, I'll show you some pictures in just a minute, but one of the cool things, in addition to just getting this connection completed, is that there will be a signal being placed on 72nd at Tech Center Drive, which I think is going to be very helpful. That's where you're going up that hill and around a curve, and I think it's actually a good place for a signal. I think it'll be very helpful. So that work is starting. Main Street Phase 2, I have some information I'll share at the end as well, but we're actively engaging with all the businesses right now. The Water Master Plan, you'll be hearing about that right after I'm done. John Goodrich is going to talk about the Water Master Plan. So very excited to get that update completed and before you for consideration. I highlighted in yellow because this is very exciting to me, is that the reason for the project wasn't exciting, but you'll remember last year in Greenfield when we had to close it for many months because we had the water line break and it did severe damage to that street, and we had to keep it closed for many months until we could actually get in there and do construction during better weather. That project was completed well under the original budget we thought it might take. That was because of some really great cooperative work with our consultant, Wallace Consultants, the city staff, and the contractor, and it just really came together well, and we were able to work with the contractor during construction. It reduced the amount of actual work that was needed. For instance, we were able to keep a lot of the sidewalks and not replace them. So not only did it come in well under budget, we submitted it to the Oregon chapter of the American Public Works Association, and it won an award recently. So for Project of the Year for Emergency Project. So kudos to the city of Tigard. Let's see. Sanitary sewer projects. I'll show you again some photos in a minute about the sanitary siphon project, which was actually a really cool project. The downtown sanitary sewer line is in 99W and a bit of Main Street. So that's lining an existing pipe that is very old. The walls have grown very thin because we had to clean it so often, but we're lining it so that it won't have to be open cut construction. So that will really limit the impacts to traffic, and the work will be done at night. So we're going to allow that to happen in December, but it should not really be disruptive at all, which is really awesome. It's great technology. Stormwater projects. I think I'll just highlight the Kruger Creek stabilization project. You know, that again, that's the one where there was the video with Carla Stetter, our staff person, in the big deep canyon. So that project, we're right now in the process of selecting the design consultant. So that design is going to get underway for that project. That's a massive project to stabilize and rebuild that stream channel from all the way up just below Bull Mountain Park, all the way down the hill past Greenfield, and down and beyond Gardy Street. Really huge project. That's kind of the first big one in line that from the master plan effort and from council's approval of a rate increase for stormwater. So much appreciated, so we can tackle these huge erosion problems. And then on facilities projects, just a heads up, there'll be an executive session soon to talk about the Public Works Facility and Yard project. That one, I'll just note, the reason why it has a yellow on schedule isn't because it's behind, it's because it's an extremely aggressive schedule to try to find a site, a multi-acre site for a new public works building and design and build a building in a short time frame. And then just a quick note for sticklers to details is the copy of this slideshow that was on the AIS for the City Hall remodel said that construction was still underway, and I updated that. Construction's actually complete, so yay. And then onto the slides. I know this is hard to see. It's really hard to do something long and linear on a slideshow, but what I'll note about it, this is really just a note that the Main Street, Green Street Phase 2 project, which goes from basically the railroad tracks up to Scoffins, the design is underway. It's at 30% design, so that's kind of preliminary design level. And we're going to be putting these, well, a lot of these materials, like these graphics, you can look at on the city's webpage. So if folks go to, if they know how to get to the Tigard Engage website, you can find the Main Street project right there and look at the 30% design concept drawings. If you don't, if you go to the city's main webpage and under the heading of community, explore Tigard, and then click on downtown, you can scroll down to Main Street and click on that title, and it'll take you to a bunch of information about the project and these drawings. So I encourage people to take a look at what's being proposed. It's very exciting. So, and then we'll get all engineering geeky here with this one. This is really cool. This is the sanitary sewer siphon under Fano Creek. This is nearly complete. The picture on the left shows what this used to look like. So you can see these two pipes that, this is in Fano Creek, and this is how it used to look, these two pipes sticking out of the creek. How over the years it never had a log end up jammed against it and broke open those pipes and had sewage in the creek is beyond me, but it worried our operations staff forever. This is called a siphon. The idea of a siphon is usually with sewers, you want them to go downhill and use gravity to go downhill, but sometimes you have to go under something like a creek. So a siphon is you take one pipe, put it into two smaller pipes, and it forces the flow under the creek in the pipes. So this project replaced those two pipes that were sticking up in the middle of the creek, and we did directional drilling under the creek. And the picture on the right just shows like a receiving manhole. You can see the green pipe where flow's coming in, and then it goes out. There's two pipes to go out that you can operate one at a time to make it go under the creek and head down the hill to the Durham wastewater treatment plant site. So really important project to have completed. And then here's a picture of, well, new walls on New Wall Street. So if you go down to Tech Center Drive to the end of that, that's the direction you're looking at here. This street project actually has two walls, one on each side, on the railroad track side and then on the uphill side. But this wall construction is actively underway, and soon we'll have a street connection completed all the way from 72nd and Tech Center Drive around to Hunsiger. So pretty exciting. Next few months we'll see that completed, including, like I mentioned, the signal. So that's it for my presentation. Are there any questions?
Well, you covered a lot of ground, but it was really informative. I think for any members of the public that are watching, gives you a good idea of all the capital projects that our great staff and city are working on. And so thank you for that, Engineer Faya. And with that, I will open to council questions. Council President Goodhouse, any questions or comments?
No, none. Thank you. I always appreciate the detailed presentation. It always helps, and the detail is definitely appreciated.
All
Youth
right.
Councilor Calderon.
I'm just amazed that those two pipes never broke, and I'm glad we will never have to worry about that again.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
No questions, thank you.
Councilor Newton.
No questions, but great work, City Engineer Feha, and kudos to your staff. I know it's been difficult, but it's just really great to see all the good work that's being done in Tigard. So thanks for that thorough report.
And we won an award.
Yay!
Well, our staff won an award. I don't think we get to claim any credit as I think about that, but excellent for them. Councilor Loop.
No questions, but thank you for the presentation. It's always, I think fascinating to see just all of the different things that are going on that we may not necessarily have front and center, like the pavement management. I think, everyone can see very clearly in the summer as they're driving, but a lot of these projects aren't as obvious, and it's important to see how busy the city really is. And again, kudos to, the city staff for continuing to work. I'm amazed at people who are doing it, full-time jobs, working with kids, trying to do the Zoom and all of that. I mean, I'm just trying to figure it out with an infant, so I can't imagine them being on their own and sort of functioning their own little being. So kudos to the staff and everyone for getting that done. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson, did I call on you for this? Did you have any comments?
Yes, you did. No comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, I think I got everybody covered. My team's application is really interesting tonight. Okay, City Engineer Faya, thank you very much, and we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to receive a briefing on the 2020 Draft Water Master Plan findings and recommendations. Mr. Goodrich.
All right, let's see if I can, I am on and everybody can hear me?
We can.
All right, so I see I have Candace there. So, yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. For the record, I'm John Goodrich, Executive Manager in Public Works and direct responsible charge for the community's drinking water system. Tonight's workshop is the second of two presentations regarding the 2020 Water System Master Plan project. The first presentation was on October 20th, and it was to provide an overview of the project elements. The purpose of this master plan project is to meet Oregon State drinking water requirements and improve the level of service to customers by reviewing the performance criteria, take a look at the resiliency and the reliability of our system, and prioritizing needs identified within the 20-year planning period. The Water System Master Plan, it reviews the components of the existing water distribution system. It takes a look at the water demand patterns within the service area, evaluates the performance of the water system with respect to service standards. Those are utility service standards, such as water quality, water pressure, fire suppression, etc. And it prioritizes those improvements necessary for any remedies to the system as far as any deficiencies and to accommodate for future growth. The plan provides recommendations for specific projects to add to the water utility capital improvement program, and this is very important. These projects will ensure that the water system continues to provide safe and reliable service to the Tigard Water Service Area. The plan meets the requirements prescribed under ORS Chapter 333, Division 61, just giving a shout out to those state requirements. It also provides important information necessary for accurate cost of service and rate analysis. This is work that the city is conducting currently, and once the plan is adopted, then that information can be plugged into the cost of service analysis models. We're also getting ready to kick off a system development charge methodology update, and this plan will provide very important inputs that will also be going into the model for system development charges. Council scheduled to consider adopting the plan on December 8th, which will complete the project. We have the same project team as we did on October 20th with us tonight. Heidi Springer, senior engineer with Murray Smith, is a project consultant lead. Candace Coleman is a project engineer with Murray Smith, and she'll be conducting the presentation to council tonight. And Shasta Billingsbeck, senior project engineer in public works, and she is our staff project lead. Shasta and I will be providing support to Candace and Heidi for any questions that may occur throughout the presentation. With that, unless council has any specific questions at this time, I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to Candace to start the presentation and go over the findings and recommendations.
Okay, thank you, John. And can everybody see my screen? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
It's good to see you all again. I last time gave you some background information on what goes into a water master plan, and this time I would like to talk about the findings and recommendations. So I'm going to do some review of what we talked about last time. Just the main thing is that the primary goal of the city's water system is to deliver clean, safe, and reliable water to your taps. There are 4 primary components of your water system. That includes the Clackamas River, where your water comes from, the Lake Oswego-Tigard Water Partnership, which is how the water gets to your system and is treated. Not in that order, it's treated and then gets to your system. Then your distribution system that supplies water to your tap, and then also your ASR wells, which provide a second resilient supply source to help meet peak summer demands and provide supply diversity in case there is a disruption to your LOT supply. To complete the water system analysis, we started by projecting water demand for 20 years, and this is to determine if your supply sources can meet future demands. Then we established your water service goals. This sets a range of acceptable water delivery goals and addresses system measures such as service pressure or fire flows in the distribution system. And then from the analysis of demand and supply and the distribution system, we have identified system deficiencies and developed solutions. So in analyzing the water supply, we look at all of your sources and determine if they are adequate now and in the future. We use a metric called firm capacity or reliable capacity, which is the output of all sources with the largest source out of service. We considered water rate and water quality, and we qualified the risks to the supply sources, which helped us determine the reliability of each source. So now I would like to talk a bit about supply versus demand. On this graph here, this red line represents your maximum day demand, which generally occurs in July. So this is the day where you require the most water. And then this purple line here is your firm supply. You can see that today you have adequate firm supply. And remember, this is considered with ASR2 out of service. Next year, ASR2 will be being rehabilitated, so that won't be a supply source. But don't panic, because you also have interties with neighboring water providers, and you have well 2, which can be used as a backup source. And then once these ASR projects are completed in 2022, you'll have ASR 1, 2, and 3. And then as your demand continues to grow, around 2030, there will be a need for another supply source. And I say another supply source, but actually what we're recommending is an LOT expansion project. And basically how it stands now is you have 18 million gallons per day of LOT water, but there are restrictions in the system that only allow you to get 14 million gallons per day. So I will discuss the components of this project in the next slide, but right now I want to hand it over to John and Shasta so that they can answer any questions you might have about the impacts and benefits of supply planning for future growth.
Yeah, thank you, Candace. So I just wanted to make sure that, for council to understand that this is a 20-year planning period. We've just completed the Lake Oswego-Tigard Water Partnership project as far as our joint water supply system. We're entering our 5th year of operation under completion of that system. When we put the project together, originally we were 14 MGD. That was the original agreement. And then in 2013, we were able to acquire 4 MGD of additional capacity at a cost of $20 million. That $20 million was added to our debt service. We borrowed money in order to pay that cost. And so we have 18 MGD of capacity, but at the time that we purchased the 4 MGD of capacity, we did not have the ability within the city to utilize that 4 MGD. And it was decided that we would save those projects or identify those projects at a later date once we operated for a number of years with the system so that we could ensure to identify what those deficiencies would be. Candace is going to describe some of the parts of the projects that'll be necessary. A couple of those will be within the Lake Oswego-Tigard partnership, having to do with the water treatment plant. Both at the raw water intake facility and at the water treatment plant as far as raw water pump and finished water pump. And then we have some deficiencies within the system, some bottlenecks that we will be required to take care of in order to access that water. As you know, we're trying to, as you know, we're adjudicating water rights as well with Lake Oswego's water rights. And there's a system of being able to access those water rights once we get through the adjudication process. In order to do that, we'll need to build capacity in order to access the water before we can actually ask for the water for beneficial use. So there's a little bit of a planning portion of that as well that says if we want to perfect water rights or ensure that those water rights are sound, that we'll have to make some improvements to the system and show beneficial use. So, and then of course our ASR program, we have a lot of capacity that's been spent already that our customers have funded, and so we want to be able to utilize that to the best of our ability, both for peak demand but also for emergency demand. So that's what kind of represents this chart over the next 20 to 30 years. With that, I can take any questions, and I might ask Shasta if she has anything to add that perhaps I've missed in this discussion.
No, John, I think you covered it wonderfully.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Goodrich, I just want to comment that I still think, and I think I don't just think, I know that I was the only member of the council at the time that we made the grand bargain for the 4 million gallons a day in perpetuity, but I still think it'll be or is the best $20 million ever spent in Tigard. And I believe, Councilor Newton, didn't you negotiate that when you were the assistant city manager?
I did, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Goodrich, for reminding me. I did ask interim city manager to remind me about the timing of this, and I remember now that we made the decision that we were going to have to do some planning down the road. And I appreciate your explanation because it's reminding me of all the pieces that we knew were going to have to come together before we could access that additional 4 MGD. So I appreciate that. I was involved at the time, but I wasn't on the council. So I wasn't involved in the discussions in terms of all the elements that would need to come into play. So thank you very much for that explanation. Very helpful. And I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, best 20 million we ever spent.
I mean, if you look
Right.
at the red line to just reinforce this, if I'm interpreting this chart right, and I'm sure Candace and John can correct me, but if I'm interpreting the chart right, even if we had built, we had ASR 3 by 2036, we would have basically run out of water potentially, and that's we bought ourselves a lot more time with future water source needs there. Am I interpreting that right, Mr. Goodrich?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The ability to have the growth opportunity that we've had in the River Terrace area would have been very difficult under a Portland contract and utilizing just ASR. So you are correct. This is we have already started making the types of improvements necessary to fully access our 18 MGD. The RIPS pump number 5 is currently under construction. That's anticipated to be completed within this fiscal year. That's the 5th pump for the RIPS. And so that will fully.
Let's translate that for the public. That's the river intake pump station.
The raw water intake facility that's located in Gladstone on the Clackamas River. So originally that was constructed with 4 pumps with a 5th pump as a blank. And then we've this last year had funded the improvements necessary to add another pump. Now we did that for a reliability purpose, but needless to say, it still adds capacity and provides firm capacity within the raw water intake pumping facility. The other component will be a finished water pump. That's a 600 horsepower, very large pumping system. Another pump that needs to be added, that would be the 6th pump within the water treatment plant. And that would again provide the reliability of being able to provide 38 MGD to both communities like Oswego and Tigard. So we're starting to, and then tonight, Candace and Heidi will be showing you some of the other improvements that will be necessary within the city. But from the staff's perspective, this has always been part of our project plan, and this master planning effort allowed us the opportunity to take a look at what we can do to address these over the planning period. So with that, I'll go ahead and get moving on.
Well, let me make sure. So Councilor Newton and I got to speak. Does any other member of council have questions or comments quickly? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Goodrich.
I do. I had my hand up. I don't know if you could see it.
Sorry, Council President Goodhouse, go ahead.
Yeah. I've carried over from the last time we had this discussion. On the second slide where it's our system, I would still like to see, and I don't know what the rest of the council's thoughts are, but at least an image that shows the WIF intake at the minimum. I think that we had a discussion before, and I know the mayor had agreed at some points that the sooner we can start conveying that conversation that we do have, that is something that's part of our system. We have paid into it, so it's something we have spent, whether or not we're using it or not, it's part of the system, and it kind of just at least telegraphs for future that that's something that's going to be used and something we'll be pulling from.
Which graph are you suggesting it should be on? The one that's on the screen now?
No, it's the second one. It says our system delivers clean, safe, and reliable water. And it's got a tier, like a raindrop of the Clackamas. Yes, that one. So we show the Clackamas, we show the LOT partnership, distribution, the ASR wells, but I think that something should be at least shown for a WIF intake or Willamette River intake or something. That way it just shows at a glimpse so that people see it, that we have that as part of our system.
I think the struggle is that it's not capable of delivering water right now, at least if I'm understanding what the meaning of this slide is. But Mr. Goodrich, do you care to comment?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would agree that for the purposes of tonight's presentation and the purposes of this master plan, because the Willamette supply is not available at this time and won't be until 2026, we anticipate in the next planning period, when the water master plan is updated, that the Willamette supply will probably be better identified. I think from council's perspective, we still have a little work to do as far as the city charter and getting that issue addressed. But I guess from staff's perspective, I see it as a three-legged stool, and we've got ASR, we've got our Lake Oswego Tigard partnership, and then the Willamette Supply is certainly that third leg of the stool. What we're addressing tonight has to do with meeting future demands, but another component has to do with resiliency and reliability. And for a lot of water utilities, the way that they're addressing that is to have a secondary separate water system or water supply system. And Tigard geographically just happens to be in a unique area that could be very possible.
All right, why don't we continue?
Okay, before I go into the specifics of this LOT expansion, I do want to point out that Tigard does have water rights for expansion of the ASR system. So while it's not for a while that it's anticipated that another well will be needed, we do recommend that a feasibility study be conducted just to figure out if ASR really is a viable source in the future. Because if it turns out that it isn't, then that makes it more important to explore things like the Willamette water supply or neighboring water providers. So John already talked about a couple of the projects involved in getting that 18 MGD from LOT. First of all, the river intake pump, which is an ongoing project right now, and then the pump at the water treatment plant. There's also a section of pipe between the Waluga Reservoir and Pump Station 5 that is undersized to deliver this 18 MGD. And so there's approximately a mile of large diameter pipe that is recommended to be installed in Bonita Road. And I do want to point out that this portion of the existing pipe was installed in the 1970s, and because this stretch of pipe is a critical component of the LOT system in an emergency, specifically the much anticipated Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, the addition of a new large diameter pipe has the added benefit of strengthening the system's seismic backbone. And I will talk about this a little bit later as well. And then in addition to this stretch of pipe, another pump is needed at the Bonita, we call it Pump Station 5. It used to be Bonita Pump Station. We're trying to get away from that, but you guys can call it whatever you want. And then, so another pump is needed here at Pump Station 5, and then there is a stretch of pipe on the downstream side of this pump station that crosses Fano Creek that is also undersized for delivering 18 MGD. So we are recommending that a second large diameter pipe be installed across the creek to add additional capacity and reliability. So I'm going to move on to the distribution system analysis. Last time I talked about the components of this analysis. Operational efficiency is analyzed to determine if there are opportunities to change the way the system operates that will result in reduced power costs or maintenance. The distribution system analysis determines if the range of pressures and fire flows fall within the level of service goals. The analysis determines if there's adequate water reserves to provide operational emergency and fire flow storage. Pump stations are evaluated for the ability to provide firm capacity and adequate pressures. And the condition of each facility is assessed, including a look at life cycle and the need for rehabilitation, replacement, or abandonment. I showed you this graphic last time, but I wanted to bring it up again because I'm going to talk a lot about pressure zones. So we have generally our storage at high elevations that feeds service connections at lower elevations by gravity. So the connections at the lowest point will have the highest pressure, and the connections at the higher elevations will have lower pressure. And the pressure zone, the system is divided into pressure zones so that there's a limited elevation range that is served from each tank, and this is typically a 70 to 100-foot range, and this just ensures that all customers receive water pressure within an adequate range. So one of the main things that we wanted to look at as part of this plan was combining all of these 560 subzones. They, as you can see on this map, that it's all the white area. All of these subzones are not connected to each other. And this is a typical issue with service areas that are pieced together over time. But we wanted to find ways to combine these small isolated areas to increase service reliability. And connecting these zones has many benefits, including lowering pumping energy. And this is something I talked about last time. Water right now is pumped up Bull Mountain and then dropped down to these zones, as opposed to just being pumped from a lower elevation right into that zone. So decreasing pumping energy, decreasing reliance on reservoirs 8.1, 8.2, 8.3. These are located up here. They're already stressed and at capacity, whereas connecting these 560 zones would put them on reservoir 16, which has excess capacity right now. Another benefit would be that it would eliminate a bunch of PRVs around the system, and this is important because when you have a lot of PRVs, they're difficult to operate, and they also require a lot of maintenance.
And you want to just mention for the public what that means, like what that stands for?
Oh, I'm sorry, pressure reducing valves. So because the water is coming from a very high elevation, when it gets down to these lower elevations, it has a really high pressure. So these pressure reducing valves are inserted to make sure that the pressure range is acceptable. So as part of this consolidation project, we're also recommending that this 530 zone be consolidated into the 560 zone. And this will be a benefit to this area because there's no storage in this area, and there's also not enough pumping to provide the recommended fire flow. So some of these subzones will be simple to connect. It might just involve inserting a valve or opening a valve, but connecting some of these other subzones will require installation of pipe, about 2 miles in total. But it should be noted that a lot of this pipe is also part of the seismic backbone. So similar to the LOT expansion project, adding this pipe will greatly benefit the system reliability in the event of a major earthquake or other emergency. So consolidation of these 560 pressure zones will require additional storage in the 560 pressure zone. But remember that this is because many of the service connections will no longer be reliant on reservoirs 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3, which is already quite stressed. So this additional storage, which is reservoir 18, will work in conjunction with the existing reservoir 16 to serve the new 560 pressure zone. There will be a siting study conducted to determine the best location for this reservoir, but it will likely be in the area of this Cache Nature Park. Completion of this reservoir will require the installation of a pump station to fill the reservoir, as well as the piping to connect the reservoir to the 560B subzone area in here. And then a final part of this project will be to connect the 560B subzone to the 560A subzone. There is proposed piping that will run through this River Terrace area, and then this red line here is the connection that will be needed between those two subzones. In the 410 pressure zone, on the west side of the system is another area where more storage will be needed with growth. There are quite a few 410 pressure zone reservoirs around the system, and we are recommending abandonment of several of them. And this is in part due to the condition of the reservoirs and their need for rehabilitation, but it's also due to their location relative to supply sources and where the growth is occurring. And because the growth is occurring in River Terrace and this King City West down here, it makes more sense to have a 410 pressure zone reservoir in this area. There is not, I put the reservoir here, that's not necessarily where it's going to be. The city will need to find a location for this reservoir, and that will be dependent on land availability and appropriate ground elevation. So the 713 pressure zone is served by 3 reservoirs, the 81, 82, and 83. And of these reservoirs, this reservoir 83 is very small, and it's much older than the other reservoirs, and it's in need of rehabilitation. However, because of the small footprint of the site, it's kind of unrealistic to rehabilitate this tank. So we're recommending that it be abandoned, and in its place, a new pump station 8 be built. The current pump station 8 is in need of rehabilitation, but it is also located, there are 3 pumps on one side of the street and then 2 pumps on the other side of the street. So it would be beneficial to have them housed all in one location. So in our last meeting, I talked about the use of a computerized hydraulic model to identify areas of the system that are not currently or will not in the future provide a satisfactory level of service, specifically low or high pressures or fire flow. We identified one area that has the potential for low pressures, although there have not to date been any customer complaints. However, the model shows that as demand increases, pressures will get lower in some areas, and this area, 150th Avenue and Burgundy Court, is an area that stands out. It would be relatively simple to connect these customers to the 830 pressure zone if it is determined that there are low pressures in this area, which would be if there are customer complaints about it or if monitoring reveals low pressure. The model showed high pressures in the 713 pressure zone. However, there will be some opportunity to move some of these services to the 560 zone with the consolidation of those 560 subzones. And this will lower the pressure for those services. And then the 530 pressure zone stood out as an area that could use improvement in fire flow, and connecting this pressure zone to the consolidated 560 pressure zone would solve this problem and add storage to the 530 pressure zone. So in our last meeting, I talked about the importance of having a pipe renewal and replacement program. To reiterate, as pipes age, they start to fail, and pipe failures often manifest themselves in the form of a pipe break that requires emergency repairs that are costly and cause unnecessary damage and interruptions in water service. So failing to address pipe failures now kind of pushes it down the road, and if pipes aren't replaced now, the cost to replace pipes in the future could be exorbitant. The American Waterworks Association has released guidance on how to approach this issue, and the first step is a desktop assessment, which uses existing data to prioritize replacement of the pipes. A risk level is assigned to each pipe based on the likelihood of failure and the consequence of failure. The likelihood of failure considers factors such as age, previous leaks or breaks, and material. A pipe with a high likelihood of failure might be one that was installed in the 1970s in corrosive soil. The consequence of failure considers factors such as population density and road classification. A pipe with a high consequence of failure is one that affects many residents and businesses and may cause a disruption in a busy road. Tigard's water system has about 10,000 pipe segments. A segment of pipe is determined by the valves or fixtures on each end of the pipe, and each segment is assigned a likelihood of failure level and a consequence of failure level, the product of which is the risk score, which ranges from 1 to 5. In this map, pipes with a risk score of 5 are shown in red, and these are the high-risk pipes. When you look at this map, you see areas of red, and then some which could be due to, say, a recorded break or proximity to a critical customer. So there are some, they may seem like random high-risk pipes in the middle of nowhere, but there is a reason for that. The importance of this map is that it shows areas of focus rather than individual pipe segments that should be replaced. It's important to view this map as areas of focus because the intention isn't to replace a small segment of pipe here and there, it's to address high-risk areas. So, for example, over the course of a few years, you might concentrate on pipe replacements in just this area. We recommend that Tigard use this analysis to help build a replacement program based on critical areas. A useful pipeline renewal and replacement program aims to replace a system's pipes within a reasonable time frame, generally around 100 years, making this a continual program. We recommend that Tigard aim for replacement of 3 miles of pipe per year. We understand that this will take a significant amount of preparation and planning for your team, so this program should be ramped up over a few years, starting with planning and design and working up to replacement of 3 miles of pipe per year. So last time I gave you some background on the Cascadia Subduction Zone earthquake and the Oregon Resilience Plan, which requires water providers to develop a 50-year seismic capital improvement plan. As part of the guidance, we identified supply sources that are most likely to survive the impact of the earthquake. For Tigard, this is the ASR wells, as historically they have shown to have limited damage from earthquakes, or wells in general do. So the Oregon Resilience Plan states that within 24 hours after a significant seismic event, supply should be available at key reservoirs. So the idea is that the ASR wells will withstand the seismic impact and be able to fill critical reservoirs that have been seismically hardened. So rather than thinking that your distribution system is going to be able to supply all customers after a large earthquake, the idea is that the reservoirs will be full and people can fill water containers at the reservoir site. So that's kind of the first step is making sure that ASR wells can fill the critical reservoirs. The second step is getting the LOT back online, assuming that it suffers damage and may not have power. And then here is the pipeline I was talking about for the LOT expansion that needs to be seismically hardened. to ensure that you can get LOT supply into the system. And then finally, we have the backbone transmission piping that connects all of the sources and the reservoirs. And this I also talked about with the zone consolidation projects. Some of this piping will also benefit seismic resilience. So this backbone was overlaid on a series of seismic hazard maps, which showed risk of liquefaction, lateral spreading, landslide, and ground shaking. And the good news is that it looks like Tigard's water system will do pretty well. The ASR well system is expected to largely withstand the impacts of the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. And of Tigard's critical pump stations, only pump station 5 was identified as being at risk. While a seismic analysis was incorporated into the design of the pump station, additional exploration is recommended to better understand the soil characteristics at the site. Also, the reservoirs are expected to handle the impact pretty well. The only reservoir that is at risk is Reservoir 13 because there's potential for seismic landslide. And then, based on the location of the city's identified backbone pipes, seismic hazards to the pipes are relatively low, as most of the pipes are located in non-liquefiable soils or weathered rocks along the slopes of Bull Mountain. So, excuse me. The next step in this process, according to the Oregon Resilience Plan, is to develop a 50-year seismic resilience capital improvement program. And developing this plan will include further borings and analysis of Pump Station 5 and Reservoir 13, and also will devise a plan to address the backbone pipe that isn't already seismically hardened. And with that, here is the proposed capital improvement plan for the years 2021 through 2025. The main project is Reservoir 18, including the pump station and all the piping associated with it. Also included in this plan is the Pump Station 8 rebuild, a couple of the zone consolidation projects that will directly benefit from this Reservoir 18 project. And then the beginning of the pipe renewal and replacement program. And the assumption here is that in the first year of this program, it will be mostly dedicated to planning and design. And year 2, maybe a mile of pipe is replaced, and the program will ramp up to eventually replacing 3 miles of pipe per year. And then also in the next 5 years is development of the excuse me, the 50-year seismic CIP and this ASR feasibility study to help inform moving forward with ASR in the future. For the 2026 to 2030, the main project here are the projects for the LOT supply expansion, as well as the rest of the projects to complete the zone consolidation. And at this point, it's assumed that the pipe renewal and replacement program will be fully ramped up. And then for 2031 to 2040, we have this new 410 pressure zone reservoir to serve the growth in River Terrace and King City West, and continuation of the pipe renewal and replacement program. And that is all.
Wow, that is a lot to take in. Councilor Lube, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Council President Goodhouse?
Yes, I had two questions. One, it was in the beginning of the presentation, and see if I got it right. With the changing from the what was that? That's someone was talking. With the pumping up the bulb mountain going down, but changing it, did you say that some of the areas would have lower pressure than they did before by making the change?
So it's possible. Let me go back to that slide. So this 713 pressure zone, I mean, this is on the slopes of Full Mountain. So a lot of these services down at the lower end have high pressure, and consolidating these 560 zones, there's a possibility that you could move some of these services from the 713 to the 560.
Okay. Oh, good.
Council President Goodhouse, I think one thing that might help for explanation here is, when you have higher pressures, that can be over time cause fatigue in your pipes and fittings, which can be a risk to the system for pipe failure. But services that currently have excessive pressure will have an individual pressure regulator on their service. So chances are they won't experience a significant change in the service pressure at their home.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to find out, because if some people had their system designed that way, or people had sprinkler systems or something, I was just curious what effect that may have if they had one pressure setting and or at one pressure amount and then it changed. So then if it was not going to change, but it would just help the with the pipes, then okay, that made sense. So
it's more, I think the importance of it is that it reduces, if some of those services move to the 560 zone, it reduces the reliance on these storage reservoirs at the top of Bull Mountain that are already stressed.
And then Candace, didn't you also mention that there's a bunch of pressure reducing valves that are highly maintenance intensive that would not then have to be used so much?
Yeah, I didn't really highlight them here on this map, but these valves are the green dots that kind of follow the outline of the green area, and those are all valves that have to be kind of operated in conjunction with each other, and it's difficult to operate, and it requires a lot of maintenance.
And Council President Goodhouse, did you have another question?
Yeah, and the other question I just had, when the reservoir 8-1 for the structural analysis, analyzing those tanks, is that kind of just standard analysis, or what's that calculation, and what happens if there's extra work that's needed or if it has to be rebuilt?
Yeah, I think at this point we don't actually know if it needs significant work. It's more just an analysis of it, and then in the next planning phase, if work is needed, it will be addressed then.
Okay, thank you.
Youth Councilor Calderon, any questions?
No questions, but good luck. This seems like a big project and you guys have your work cut out for you, but I'm sure you'll do well.
Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so the proposal is to update 3 miles of pipe a year. What are we doing currently?
What was that?
What are we doing currently?
Oh, I think Shasta or John maybe.
I can go ahead and answer that. So we do have a line item in the water CIP for water line replacement. At this point in time, it's not a lot of money. The utility in the city hasn't been focused on pipeline replacement, except in areas where there's an opportunity. And so if there's a road improvement or something that's occurring and we make an analysis that the pipe needs to be replaced, then we try to scramble to seek funding for that, and we'll generally create it as a separate project and not be utilizing this line item. What's being proposed tonight in this master plan is kind of the starting gate for us to put together a really robust program that's going to serve the city well over the next 20 to 40 years. But it starts at the planning phase and trying to determine how do we decide which pipe needs to be replaced, because they're underground. They're very difficult as far as condition assessment. Right now, this particular analysis is using age and the type of pipe material. 25% of our pipe is cast iron. Cast iron isn't very resilient. It has a tendency to break very easily, when in a shear mode of being snapped. Ductile iron is ductile, and so it has a little bit more strength as such. So we've got 25% of pipe that probably needs to be replaced over the next 20 to 30 years. And so we need to start somewhere. And this is putting together making us sharpen our pencils and take a look at asset management, take a look at pipe condition assessment, trying to find technologies that allow us to do that, and then move forward. So as Candace pointed out, we'll have to start with small and maybe at a high level of taking a look at our piping structure and the age, and developing a project plan over the next couple of years as we start to fund that. And there's also opportunities, so we'll have to pay attention and work with our transportation folks and others to make sure that if there's an opportunity for us to replace the pipe in conjunction to a project that's occurring, that we have the funding available, we have the staffing resources in order to do the design work, and be able to move forward in a timely manner to meet the needs of whatever that project is.
So like looking at the red on this map, John, that would mean that I would assume anytime road is being pulled up in the red areas or even the orange ones, that should be getting pretty close scrutiny now?
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Yeah, this map helps to kind of show, just from an aesthetic standpoint of just looking at it, you can you would be able to just guess that about 25% of the system is cast iron, and that the other 75% is ductile. Obviously, all the work that we're doing in River Terrace, that's all new pipe and should have a very long life cycle as such. So I think that as we put together our asset management program, that perhaps there might be an opportunity to come back to council, maybe talk a little bit more about the pipe renewal and replacement program and the impacts of what that program would look like, both from a financial standpoint, but also from just a disruption standpoint within the city. The staffing resources that would be necessary to do it. There are a lot of decisions that are going to need to be made over the next year or two as the program rolls out and as the analysis takes a look at what the best methodology or the best practices for the city.
Councilor Anderson, any other questions?
Yes, thanks, John. No further questions.
It sounds like the short answer to the question is there isn't a comprehensive replacement program now. We do it by sort of when something breaks or when there's some opportunity that we think is important, but this is going to put that into a different stage of planning and coordination. I'm struck by how much of the very focused red area is around Highway 99. At least that's what it looks like to me. Mr. Goodrich, is that just because of the age of when development happened in certain areas?
Yes, I think that is the case.
A lot of that is
also they're more critical. Go ahead, Candace.
The other part of it is the consequence of failure. If you were to have a pipe break in that road, it would be kind of a big deal. So you want to not have that happen.
if you can imagine Greenfield occurring at, say, Greenberg and Pacific Highway, the type of impact that we would have had there, the difficulty as far as transportation, it would have been, yeah, it would have been a real challenge for the city to address that and to address it quickly enough to restore traffic.
All right, Councillor Newton, questions?
No questions. I do think taking a real hard look at this pipe renewal and replacement program is important. So I'll be interested in how that moves going forward. And also interested when we get this finally, I think it's December 8th, we're going to have final consideration. I would hope we could also look at how we're going to communicate out to the public about this, you know, and how they can find out more about the projects and what we're doing and how moving forward in a planned way for our water system benefits them. So, thanks.
Did I miss any member of council that wishes to comment or ask a question? Okay, thank you very much, team. This is a huge amount of work, and you know, for the public view, let's see if I can get this in the camera. This is what this looks like. So, huge amount of work. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Mayor, council, thank you for your time. We appreciate the opportunity to bring this to you.
All right, thank you very much. And we actually have a couple of non-agenda items tonight. That's what we'll be moving to next. And the first one is a little bit of a fun one, but I understand the interim city manager is about to have a birthday, and I thought we should just briefly sing happy birthday. You could, unlike the pledge, we'll actually do this with everybody singing, and staff, everyone on the line gets to participate. So I'll give you a couple seconds, and then we're singing. And City Manager Nyland, you better.
I'm blushing.
Everyone get their dogs out of the room, because if we're gonna sing, they might start howling.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Oh, that was really great.
Wow. That was we did not do that like all those groups that are singing online. They are much better at that than us.
Oh my God, that was classic. Thank you so much.
All right, and then Council President Goodhouse, you had a non-agenda item as well.
Yes. So with the governor's announcement on Friday with the freeze for at least 2 weeks, I wanted to have a conversation if we wanted to maybe look at maybe what we could offer for businesses, if we wanted to maybe look at any additional aid. If it's 2 weeks, you know, it's still going to be a hit to them, but it's a possibility that it could go longer than 2 weeks. I mean, ideally, it would be nice if businesses could operate in some manner with restaurants and everything like that, but I thought we would at least have a conversation, take a look at it, especially since next week we won't really have a proper council meeting. So I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on what everyone wanted to take a look at and what we maybe should have staff take a look at.
So, Mr. Purdy, are you still on the line? And not that this is only about you, but I just want to make sure that if you're there and we have questions that you're available. Or Interim City Manager Nyland, I don't know who exactly you would want to be involved in this discussion staff-wise, but I'm going to query the council, but I want staff to perhaps be ready with at least some thoughts on this. So.
Yes, as Lloyd, as we know, is online. I believe Toby has entered the meeting, and then Nicole, who's been doing a lot of coordinating on CARES funding, is also online. And then
Okay.
You have several of us here taking notes.
Okay. All right, so let's go to Councillor Lube. Thoughts on the proposal or suggestion?
I mean, Governor Brown did announce that there's another 55 million in financial assistance going out to counties for businesses, and we have a pretty robust system in place. And so I understand that the current pause is frustrating. I think it's frustrating for all of us individuals. I mean, I haven't left my house and I can't even tell you how long. And, you know, to have businesses and everybody else shut down is frustrating. But I know that we've put a lot of relief out there, and at this point, you know, I'm not necessarily comfortable allocating additional city funds when we're looking at potential long-term, you know, impacts on our funds as they are, especially with the governor announcing another 55 million today. And so I appreciate you bringing this up, but I think until we see a little bit more long-term of what we're in for and the impact of what we've already allocated, I'm not comfortable adding additional funds just for businesses.
Councillor Anderson.
I also heard about the Governor Brown's $55 million. See if we can tap into that. For 2 weeks. By the time we get the money to them, it may be, you know, business back as, well, not normal, but as it has been. So, you know, I'd be interested to see if Lloyd had any ideas, but that's where I am at.
Councillor Newton.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask Council President Goodhouse if he had any suggestions, because I would want to make sure if we did provide assistance, we've got competing, you know, we're going to have some competing needs from a lot of our community members in the future. I think it's going to be a long time before we pull out of this. But if there's something specific Mr. Purdy or Council President Goodhouse has in mind for us to consider, I'd entertain that. But just I didn't really come prepared to think about something specific we could allocate funds for today. I know they're struggling, and if there's something specific, I'd entertain it.
Youth Councillor Calderon.
Yeah, I agree with what was previously said. I was not aware of the 55 million, but that sounds like it'll be pretty helpful and very good for our businesses. And again, it's only 2 weeks, or I'm very confident that it'll be, or I'm hopeful it'll only be 2 weeks this time around. But if we're looking at extensions of that 2 week pause, and that is something we probably should start to think about. But right now, I think we're probably okay.
All right, Mr. Purdy and or Mr. LaFrance, do you want to comment on initial thoughts about what something could look like, and whether we can even make the speed happen necessary to make this helpful? Just general thoughts and suggestions for the council.
Sure. This is Lloyd Purdy, your economic development manager, and I'll pipe up now so that Toby can follow up on anything else that I'm going to share with you. The good news is, as of this week and maybe into a couple of days into next week, we will have just completed handing out to businesses $1.7 million, over 320 grants, and we've been grant making and for months now. Most all of that money came to us from the Fed via the county. Some small portion of it came to us from the state through Business Oregon. So literally this week, we're about to expense the last of that 1.7 million. That's through our partnership with MISO, our community development finance institution partner. So, regarding Councilman Goodhouse's comment about, really about timing, yes, this next shutdown will be a blow to our restaurateurs, our retailers who are just now trying to get reopened. I do expect of that $55 million coming from the state that will go to the counties, but I do expect that Tigard, like the other cities in Washington County, should expect to see some of that. We meet every other week or so, at least monthly. The economic development managers around the county meet and figure out ways to coordinate with the county, and we've been doing that. So that's something we can do that won't tap our local city resources, but keep in mind those funds are limited into very narrow things like grants, as opposed to more sophisticated approaches like micro loans, which we can do, but we probably can't do it with federal money. So if you want to do something more innovative and more, in fact, impactful than grant making with federal or / state dollars, we would need to find our own funding to do other programs like the micro grants that we started doing, like the low interest loans. So we can. You'll just have to point me in the direction of the city funds you'd like to use. Given what I know, that's all I have to share right now, unless you all have other questions. And let me make space now for our finance director, Toby LaFrance, to weigh in if he has anything, or city manager, Nyland.
So hello, Mayor and Council. Toby LaFrance, Finance and Information Services Director. And just in support of what Lloyd was saying, we would be happy to work with Lloyd, keep tabs on where the state and county money is going to be going for businesses, and see how we can get that into the hands. If there is any of that available for Tigard businesses, see how we can get that in the hands as quickly as possible. Obviously, the appropriation piece, we will need to work through that, and just under Oregon budget law, there's hearing notices, et cetera, that we need to take care of. So if it really only lasts 2 weeks, it'll probably be over before we can put money into people's hands. Now, they would still need the money for the losses during those 2 weeks. And what I think we would need from council, and at some point, and if you're able to give direction this evening, great. If not, we can come to you with options, is whether or not you would want us to come forward with limiting ourselves to the state revenue and the programs that it allows, or if you want us to come with additional options that would be using additional city funds, making another draw on essentially our emergency reserve.
Now Toby, we got a fair bit of our emergency reserve replenished, right? From once the CARES funding came through, is that correct?
We did get some of that replenished, yes.
Okay, Council President Goodhouse, I see your request. Just give me a second. So I want to make sure that maybe one of the directions, if we were going to provide something, it would be to, and based on what I hear the majority of the council saying, at a minimum, we would like our team to be ready to act immediately. So if you got, or if the city received a certain allocation of funding, maybe you guys can figure out what that's estimated to be, that you've already got the program ready to go and designed similar to what took, multiple weeks to do before. Let's do that planning now, so the moment the money hits the ground, we're ready to go. At a minimum, that would be a request. I would think the council would want. And then there may be more. And Council President Goodhouse, you want to make a comment about, or you want to make a comment? So go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to follow up with Councilor Newton's comment, and I apologize that not mentioning the governor's funding as well. I saw that was there, so I didn't mention that as well. But I wanted to, the majority of this was that for at least staff to take a look at this, and as what the mayor said, for us to be ready in case we do need to do something. I have a feeling that they'll probably go past 2 weeks, and so it's better to be prepared rather than be, in 2 weeks starting the conversation. If 2 weeks happens, then it's not much time, but there might still be the aftermath of what some of the businesses went through, but at least being prepared of what programs, whether or not it's pointing those businesses in direction of what the county funds are, or how we can maybe leverage some of those money as Lloyd has done in the past, or maybe if we can figure out some way, if this goes a longer term, what we can do to advocate for some of the businesses in Tigard to at least have some kind of openings or something that they can do to still remain functional but follow within the guidelines as well. So, but that's more of a larger scope, but mainly just being prepared for what we can do for assistance, field the phone calls, because I'm sure we'll have all the same businesses coming, reaching out to us right away, and it'd be better to have this discussion now and be ready than doing it later or after the fact.
So at a minimum, be prepared, staff, for whatever share of the 55 million comes to Tigard. And I guess I want to, before we send the staff off on a request to maybe develop a proposal, we would consider spending some of our reserves that maybe were just replenished. Is the majority of the council feel like that's some? Go ahead, Lloyd. Did you want to say something?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. To your point, here's a scenario we've faced with the Business Oregon funding. We just got done handing out about $160,000, about 60 grants tied to that funding. But for instance, we weren't allowed to cover grant administration expenses out of that money. We did have to dig into our own funds to bring, again, MISO, our partner, on board to take care of that grant administration for us. We don't know, based on that press release or based on whatever rules are tied to this next stream of funding, if there will be some type of cost, just for sheer administration. So that's an example of where we would need to look to our own resources. Then again, maybe we can cover. What
it cost us to have MISO do that, just to give the council an idea?
Yeah, it's about 7% of the cost. So okay. About $20,000 or $30,000, I recall. Now, keep in mind the $1.5 million we received from the county that we've also just about finished expensing. There was a cost to administer that too. The difference was we were allowed to take that administrative cost out of that funding. So there's a lot we don't yet know about this fifth round of funding from the state, which would actually be, if we receive any of it, the fifth round of our process. We've now 5 times gone out to our businesses and helped as many of them as we could with every dollar we had. So we have a good system in place. We can continue to, with more, if we did have more money, we could invite more businesses to come to us seeking aid. We can go back to the now hundreds of businesses we've already helped. It would not take us long operationally to get more money onto the street. But as Toby pointed out, as our finance director LaFrance pointed out, there's then also the process, the contracting, the appropriations that doesn't get done in a matter of days or weeks. So we have some ways we can try to fast track that, and we'll do our best we can. We'll move as quickly. You all know me well enough to now to know I move as quick as we can to do these good programs.
All right. So the question on the table for the rest of the council is: do you want something, at least to consider something more robust than whatever the planning for the current, whatever might come, back to the council in a couple weeks? City Manager Nyland, I don't know if we have agenda time on the 1st, but that would be, I think, the next meeting.
I believe we do have time available.
Okay, so I'd like to do a quick round robin with the council. Councilor Lube, yes, no on wanting to see more options or not?
I'd be willing to see the options. But depending upon what was presented.
Right. Okay. Councilor Anderson?
Well, state options for sure. Yeah, I guess if they came up with something, I would look at it.
Councilor Newton?
Yes, I would look at it, especially if it's something specific and an identified need out there that's very specific. I absolutely would look at that. Thanks.
Youth Councilor Calderon?
Yeah, I'll look at it all, just like every other councilor said.
Okay. So Toby and Lloyd, I'm sure that's exactly what you wanted to hear over your Thanksgiving holiday. But it is important. So Lloyd, were you going to say something else?
Yes, sir. One thought and then one question. This is not quite thinking on the fly. I've been thinking for weeks now. What more could we do? Truly, one of the best programs the most efficacious and best program we could do. And by the way, I see my boss has his hand raised. So
Yeah, I
either,
see that.
either you're telling me to pause or he wants to comment. One of the best programs we can actually do that the federal money typically doesn't allow us to do is the 40/60 forgivable loan program, where we make small loans to businesses. They go through business advising training. Some of that loan is forgiven, so some of it is like a grant. But then they're still working off of a loan program. We did that in our first round or something very similar to it, and we will actually continue to do that as that money comes back to us. If we had our own and it wasn't restricted, that's what I would recommend we do. But I would need to know, even at this point from you, how much funding you would want us to consider using. If you tell me you want another program, I'll come up with $1 million program, or $500,000. But I need to know a little more guidelines on how much you want to.
What did we do the first time? That was it 300,000 that we used the first time to do something like this, and then we've gotten a fair bit of that back.
Yes, sir. We took 300,000 to match that with funding from CDFIs to make almost $1 million in loans. Much of that was repaid back from the Fed via the county. I forget exactly how much. And that's the type of thing I would like to do again if we had funding, though I don't know if we can leverage as much money right now. A lot of those lenders are tapped. We talk about COVID fatigue. Well, some of these micro lenders are facing some of that as well. So we could try to do something like that. And yes, to answer your question, it was $300,000.
Mr. Asher.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, and Council, good evening. I've been listening carefully and have just found I've gotten a little confused here. Just want to make sure that I'm tracking. Just to be clear, we are poised and ready to deploy any money that comes to us from the state through the county, and we already have the program in place. I want to be sure that I understand what you're asking Mr. Purdy and Mr. LaFrance to do is to propose something in addition to that would make use of Tigard's emergency reserve, that we would be deploying more local dollars. What are we coming back?
Well, though, you've hit what I think exactly what the proposal is. Everyone on the council says, be prepared and ready to spend the county money or the state money that goes to the county, that goes to the city, effectively, quickly, and efficiently. There's no debate about that. And I think we all are in uniform agreement on that. Council President Goodhouse would like to see more. And every other member of the council has said they're willing to look at a proposal for more and evaluate whether it's needed, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And I think Lloyd was probably right to ask, do you have an amount in mind?
Well, I was thinking the amount that we'd already allocated before, that at least as a consideration, that we got repaid most of or much of. If we really only got repaid a third of it, then I think I'd be thinking about a smaller number, but I feel like we've gotten a significant portion of it back, and maybe that, that's an opportunity to reinvest again.
Okay, thank you. We'll start from there and think. We'll verify what we got back. I want to say it was the full 300. We'll verify that and we'll build off of that. Thank you.
Council President Goodhouse.
Yes, and one other thing, and we may be doing this from a communication stance anyways, but starting tomorrow, if we can relay to the citizens and business owners the existing aid program already in place with the utility bill, I think it would be a great day with a lot of the news happening on Wednesday, if we can detail that, maybe do one for a business post and one for the residents, but then let people know that not only if they get the bill directly, but then also it'd be an opportunity to put that point out there that for businesses that don't get the bill directly, or for apartment dwellers that don't get that bill directly, that this is assistance is there, because it will really catch people's eyes tomorrow or during the end of the week.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to the administrative report. Interim City Manager Nyland, do you have an administrative report?
Of course I do. So lots of great presentations tonight, so you see how busy we are. Tonight's report will add to those updates. So just a quick update on the Public Safety Advisory Board. One of our facilitators, Kim Marshall, has reached out to all the members of our Public Safety Advisory Board, and based on the feedback we've received and the insights, we are working on a draft work plan. We will be sending out a poll to the members this week to determine a meeting date in December for our first convening. Speaking of that meeting, we have posted our management analyst position, and so far we've received 56 applications. So I'll start reviewing those over the weekend, and we are looking forward to adding another talent to our team and adding much needed capacity. As far as COVID-19, much of you have just discussed that. Tomorrow, November 18th, also known as my birthday. Thank you for recognizing that. Oregon will enter a statewide freeze, which tightens a lot of restrictions. We're going to remain in that freeze for the next 2 weeks, though we are also anticipating that that phase will last much longer. So we're encouraging those who are able to work remotely to continue to do so, and we are adjusting some of our services based on the freeze. For example, the library will be suspending its walk-up service desk for the next 2 weeks, but the rest of the innovative programs like the library takeout will continue. And our communications team is working to stress the importance of being safe and the urgency involved, especially with Thanksgiving coming up. Park master plan, the city staff are currently working with our consultant to finalize the park condition assessment and recreation analysis. So we will look forward to giving you a more thorough update in the coming weeks. One of the things they did was they launched a second survey, and we had over almost 650 people respond, telling us what they wanted parks to look like. And walking we've seen a dramatic increase in people walking due to COVID. So I know our office has lost almost 100 pounds. Just a little FYI there. We did not gain the COVID-20. And then also, Youth Counselor Calderon will be featured in an upcoming video. Yay! Thanks for doing that. So that's going to increase our engagement on that plan. So thank you. As far as communications, we've launched a central webpage to profile previous and upcoming council outreach events, library programming, podcast episodes, community surveys, and virtual city services. So all of this information is located on one page, so it'll be a lot easier for people to access what we are doing and how they can add their voice. So huge kudos to the comms team for getting that launched. And just an update, on your calendars, you'll see on November 30th, an SRO meeting to discuss that program and what we've learned so far. There is a conflict. We have confirmed that the Washington County Commissioner Harrington's meeting will be recorded. So we will send out that link so you'll be able to watch that. And just to recap what we've heard tonight, for the legislative agenda, we will include home rule under the preserve local decision making. We'll continue to refine that graphic, that pyramid that shows the connection between the strategic plan, department work plans, and the performance audit to make it clear so people see that the audit is indeed on our radar and it's going to be threaded throughout because it is important work. We will, just as you mentioned, be prepared for additional business support. So when funding becomes available, we are ready to act immediately. And then we'll have more options possibly presented at your December 1st council meeting. So just a reminder, because of the priority exercise that you had earlier in the meeting, make sure you collect your notes from that meeting and put them in your mailbag on Thursday so we can have them for record purposes. And finally, just thank you for the singing. Many people were texting me saying, "What is happening? They're singing." So thank you for that. It's very appreciated.
Kathy, can I ask a question about the mailbag pickups?
Yeah.
So I had put my stuff out after last week's meeting, and then nobody came. Are we gonna be getting the pickups weekly, even if we aren't getting a delivery, or are like what's the? I'm assuming that's why it wasn't picked up, because I didn't get a package either.
Yep, that is supposed to be happening. So thanks for letting us know, and we will send out a reminder. But yes, someone should be arriving on Thursday, even if nothing's being delivered, just to collect the notes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I move for adjournment.
I second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Council President Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Councilor Lube,
Yes.
and Councilor Anderson.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned. Good night and happy birthday, Kathy.
Happy birthday, Kathy.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.